Welcome to Caveman Sleep Stories. If you're here tonight, you're probably seeking rest, looking for something to quiet your mind and ease you toward sleep. What we often forget is that home, real home, wasn't always a place you could return to. There was a time when staying anywhere too long meant watching everything run out, when survival required reading the land signals and moving before scarcity arrived. Tonight, we're going back to when stillness meant death and movement meant life, when people followed seasons like breath, when the question wasn't whether to move, but when and where and how far. We'll follow people who carried everything they owned, who knew 1,000 camps but called none of them permanent, who understood that the land gives only briefly before asking you to leave. If you find yourself drifting off during this journey, that's exactly what should happen. Consider subscribing so these stories can be here whenever you need them. And if this helps you rest, a like helps others find their way here too. Now, settle in. Let your own stillness be a gift you can afford. We're going back to a time when constant movement was the price of survival, when footsteps traced the only path to tomorrow. The ground beneath bare feet carries the rhythm of seasons. Each step presses into earth that holds yesterday's camp, tomorrow's resting place, and the endless path between. The people who walk this world know something essential. Nothing here stays the same for long, and neither can they. Smoke rises from a fire built 3 weeks ago. The flames that seemed so generous at first now burn smaller, feeding on wood dragged from farther away each day. Around the fire, hands work hides and sharpen tools, while eyes scan the valley that has sheltered them through the warm months. The berries that clustered thick on every bush when the group arrived are mostly gone now. A few shriveled ones still cling to branches near camp, but the good patches lie 2 hours' walk to the south, and even those are picked thin. This morning, the hunters return empty-handed for the third day. The deer that grazed openly in the meadow during the first week have learned. They've shifted their feeding grounds to the next valley over, staying clear of the scent trails and disturbances that mark human presence. The group could follow them, walking 4 or 5 hours out and back each day, but that leaves camp vulnerable and children exhausted. Better to move the entire camp closer to where the animals have gone. Someone stands at the valley's edge, looking north toward the ridge where oak trees grow thick. Acorns will be falling now, drawing animals to feed. Fresh water runs in the creek there year-round. Wood lies scattered beneath the trees, fallen branches dried and ready for burning. The walk will take a day and a half with the whole group, children on shoulders, supplies bundled and carried. But once there, everything resets. New hunting grounds where deer haven't learned to be wary, plants not yet harvested, wood that doesn't require an hour's journey just to gather enough for one night's fire. Tomorrow morning, as light touches the valley, the fire will be scattered and buried. Hides will come down from the simple frames that held them. Tools will be gathered, sorted by weight and necessity. The very young will ride on backs and shoulders. The elderly will walk at the center where the pace stays steady. And the group will move again as they've moved before, as they'll move again after the ridge camp also gives what it can and then asks them to leave. This isn't wandering without purpose. This is the way survival works in a world that offers everything except permanence. Food grows and ripens and then disappears. Animals come and go with seasons older than memory. Water flows in one place during spring, dries to nothing by late summer, reappears with autumn rains. To stay still is to watch resources vanish while you sit among the scraps. To move is to stay ahead of scarcity, to arrive where abundance is just beginning rather than just ending. The rhythm starts early each year. When the last snow melts and the first green appears, the group is camped in the lowlands, where rivers swell with runoff and fish crowd the shallows. The women and older children work the banks with their hands, flipping rocks to catch fish that haven't learned caution yet. The men hunt the animals that come down from the hills to drink at the swollen streams. For a few weeks, food comes easy, but the rivers drop as spring deepens. The fish move into deeper water, harder to catch. The animals that were so visible near the water scatter back into the forest. The early greens that appeared along the riverbanks grow tough and bitter. The group knows these signs like they know their own hunger. Time to move. They head upslope, following the creeks that feed the river. The elevation changes slowly, a few hundred feet each day of walking. The change seems small, but it means everything. Up here, spring arrives 2 or 3 weeks later than in the lowlands. The plants that have already finished growing below are just starting to push up through the earth at this higher ground. Shoots and roots that were abundant in the valley 3 weeks ago are abundant here now. The group arrives just as the feast begins again, not after it ends. They camp where the creek bends around a stand of pine trees. The water runs clear and steady. Deadfall wood lies thick under the trees. Small game, rabbits, groundhogs, birds, haven't seen humans recently and haven't learned to flee at the first scent. For several weeks, this place gives everything needed, but nothing gives forever. The rabbits grow scarce, the smart ones surviving by staying hidden. The wood closest to camp gets used up, requiring longer walks to gather fuel. The edible plants get harvested down to nothing in every direction someone can walk and return in a morning. The group uses more energy gathering resources than those resources provide. The equation tips from abundance to scarcity, and when it does, staying becomes slowly starving. Farther upslope, another camp awaits. Higher ground where summer arrives even later, where different plants grow, where animals follow their own seasonal patterns. The group moves again, timing their arrival to match the peak of what that place offers. This is the dance. Not random wandering, but careful choreography timed to the land's rhythm. Each move positions them where food is most available, where water flows, where fuel exists in plenty. By midsummer, they've reached the high country. Meadows here stay green when the lowlands have baked brown. Streams fed by snowmelt run cold and constant. Large animals, elk, deer, sometimes the massive shapes of mammoths, come to these highlands to escape the heat and insects of lower elevations. The hunting is better than anywhere else all year. The group camps on a south-facing slope where evening sun lingers long. They build shelters more substantial than the quick camps of earlier months because they'll stay here longer, maybe 2 months if the hunting holds. But even as they settle in, everyone knows this isn't permanent. When autumn cold comes, these heights will become unlivable. The first hard frost will kill the plants. The animals will migrate down. Snow will bury the ground under depths too deep to travel through with children and supplies. So they watch the signs. Leaves beginning to turn, animals getting restless, the sun setting earlier each day, morning frost that doesn't melt until mid-morning. These aren't just observations. They're instructions. The land telling them when to move, which direction, how soon. The autumn migration down from the highlands takes planning. Too early, and they leave resources behind. Too late, and early snow could trap them at elevations where winter means death. The group moves when the elk begin moving, following the same instinct, heading to lower ground where winter is survivable instead of fatal. They descend through the same camps used on the way up, but everything has changed. The places that offered roots and shoots in spring now offer berries and nuts. Different plants entirely, same locations, different seasons. The river they followed upward in spring flows quieter now, but salmon push upstream, and the group times their descent to arrive at the best fishing spots exactly when the salmon run peaks. This isn't luck. This is knowledge earned over generations, memorized and passed down, the schedule of the land learned as thoroughly as hunger and thirst. By late autumn, they're back in the lowlands, but not the same spots used in spring. They move to south-facing valleys where rock overhangs provide shelter from north winds, where the sun's low winter arc still reaches the ground during the short days, where evergreen trees break the wind and hold some warmth, where springs don't freeze even when everything else does. Winter camp requires different thinking. The group can't move as freely when cold bites deep and snow covers the ground. They choose the location carefully, somewhere that will give throughout the hardest months, enough wood to last, animals that winter nearby, stored food from autumn gathering, nuts, dried berries, smoked meat. The shelters built here are more solid, double-layered hides with grass packed between for insulation, frames reinforced to hold heavy snow loads. But even winter camp isn't permanent. By late winter, everything's used up. Every tree within reasonable walking distance has been stripped of dead branches. The stores have been eaten. The game has been hunted hard, and what remains has grown extremely wary or moved away entirely. The group is tired, lean, counting days until warmth returns and movement becomes possible again. When the first thaw comes, they leave winter camp behind without looking back. The shelter that kept them alive gets abandoned to collapse under next year's snow. They head back to the lowlands where spring comes earliest, where the cycle begins again, moving not because they want to, but because staying means slowly using up everything until nothing remains. This pattern, this seasonal round, is the fundamental rhythm of life. It's not about covering maximum distance. It's about being in the right place at the right time, moving just often enough to stay where resources are fresh rather than exhausted. Most years, the group travels in a rough circle, maybe 60 or 80 miles across, returning to the same general camps each season. They know every creek, every good camping spot, every place where specific plants grow or animals gather. But knowing the circle doesn't make the movement optional. Even favorite camps can't be used continuously. A site perfect in summer becomes impossible in winter. A spring camp rich with fish becomes dry and empty by midsummer. The seasonal round isn't random wandering. It's essential rotation, giving each place time to recover while the group uses another. The water teaches this lesson most clearly. A spring that flows strong in April becomes a damp spot in the rocks by August. The group camps beside it in early spring when water gushes from the ground and pools clear and cold. They fill containers easily, wash hides in the overflow, let children splash in the runoff. For 6 weeks, water is abundant. Then the flow weakens. What poured before now trickles. The pool shrinks to a puddle. Morning gathering takes longer as people wait for containers to fill, drop by drop. Everyone drinks a bit less, uses water more carefully. The spring still gives, but barely enough. When the trickle stops completely, when the rocks around the spring stay dry all day, the group has already moved. They left 2 weeks ago when the weakening flow made it clear this place wouldn't sustain them much longer. They're camped now beside a river that flows year-round, fed by sources far upstream that don't depend on local rain. But that river has its own rhythm. In spring, snowmelt swells it into a brown torrent that floods the banks and makes the current too dangerous for fishing. The group camps well back from the water and waits. By early summer, the flow settles into a steady stream, perfect for fishing, safe for children to play near. This is when they move close, setting up camp on the gravel bars where the sound of water masks all other noise. Come autumn, the river drops. Rocks that were submerged in summer now stand exposed. The channels narrow. Fish concentrate in the deeper pools, easier to catch but also fewer. The group adjusts their fishing methods, building small weirs to trap fish in the shallow areas. It works for a while, but when the first ice appears on the water's edge, they know to move again. This river will freeze solid in the deep cold. A winter camp here would mean chipping through ice for every drop of water, assuming they could chip through ice that might grow 3 feet thick. So they move to the lowland springs that never freeze. These seeps in the rocks stay liquid even when everything else turns to ice. The flow is slow, barely enough for the group's needs, but slow water is better than frozen water. They camp as close as possible, building shelters that face away from the bitter north wind, but close enough to reach water without a long exposed walk. Water dictates everything. Food can be scarce for a few days, and the group survives. But water, 3 days without it, and people start dying. The group plans every move with water first in mind. Where will they drink? How far to the source? Will it last through their stay? When they move, the new camp must have water guaranteed, not hoped for. Some years, the normal sources fail. A drought year means springs that usually flow don't. Rivers run lower than anyone remembers. The group arrives at a planned camp and finds the water source dried up completely. They don't stay to hope it returns. They move immediately. Children carried to save their strength, walking toward the next known water, even if it means covering 20 miles in a day, pushing hard with no rest. Finding the next water brings relief so profound it's almost painful. Containers get filled, people drink deeply, the tightness of rationed water releases. The camp that gets established there isn't planned. It's determined entirely by where water exists. Everything else adjusts around that single necessity. Other years, too much water becomes the problem. Heavy rains swell rivers beyond their banks. A camp on flat ground beside a gentle stream wakes one morning to find water rising fast. The current that was easy to wade yesterday now runs waist-deep and dangerous. People grab what they can carry and move upslope, watching their camp disappear under brown water carrying torn-up trees and mud. The flood recedes after 3 days, but the camp spot is ruined. Mud covers everything. The shelters have collapsed. Supplies that weren't grabbed in time are gone or destroyed. The group doesn't try to rebuild. They move to higher ground, finding a new camp on a terrace above the flood line. This spot won't have water quite as close, but it won't drown them either. The trade is obvious. Even in normal years, water sources change character through the seasons in ways that force movement. A lake might be perfect in summer, but develop algae blooms in late season that make the water taste foul and cause sickness. The group moves to where water still runs clean. A creek might flow beautifully for months, then suddenly cloud with sediment from a slide upstream. The water becomes undrinkable, and movement becomes immediate. The group learns which water sources are reliable in which seasons. This spring flows year-round. That creek dries every summer. This river floods every spring. That lake freezes late and thaws early. The knowledge accumulates across generations, passed down in stories and direct teaching. Everyone learns the water map of their territory as thoroughly as they learn the food map. Following water means following animal patterns too, because animals need water as much as humans do. Deer come to drink at dawn and dusk. Predators wait near water sources, knowing prey must come eventually. By camping near reliable water, the group positions themselves where animals will pass. The hunting improves simply because water concentrates life, but this also means competition. Other groups know the same water sources. Sometimes 2 groups arrive at the same spring in a dry year. Usually they work something out, taking turns, sharing the space, or one group moving on to avoid conflict. Fighting over water makes no sense when both groups would be weakened and the water might not support the survivors anyway. Better to move, find another source, stay strong. The constant movement water demands teaches the group flexibility. Plans change, expected camps get skipped, new places get tried. The seasonal round has a general pattern, but water writes the specific path each year. Where it flows, the group can live. Where it doesn't, they can't stay, no matter how good the hunting or how thick the berries. Sometimes the water's behavior predicts larger changes. A spring that flowed reliably for years suddenly stops. The group might not know the reason. Maybe the underground channel shifted, maybe the rainfall pattern changed, but they know the meaning. This camp won't work anymore. Time to find new places, establish new patterns, learn new sources. The movement water demands never ends. Even winter camps beside springs that never freeze still require occasional moves when the spring's flow weakens or when game around it gets depleted. The group might shift to another spring a few miles away, giving the first one time to recover its flow, distributing their impact across multiple sources instead of draining one completely. Water shapes not just where the group goes, but how they think about the land. Every landscape gets evaluated for its water first. Is there water here now? Will there be water in a month? In 3 months? Can we reach it safely in winter? Does it freeze, go bad, run dry? The answers determine whether a place can become a camp or must remain just somewhere you pass through. And because water is so essential and so variable, the group can never truly settle. The water that sustains them today might fail tomorrow. The river that flows now might flood next week. The spring that quenches thirst in April might vanish by July. Movement is the only strategy that works. Moving to where water is, moving away when it fails, always following the shifting presence of the one resource that permits no compromise. The cold begins subtly in the high meadows. Morning frost takes longer to melt. Afternoon sun feels thinner. Nights require extra hides pulled close. These small changes arrive gradually through late summer, easily ignored at first. But the group pays attention. They've seen how quickly subtle becomes severe. They know that weather in the high country can shift from comfortable to deadly in days, not weeks. One morning, the grass crunches underfoot with frost that doesn't melt even by midday. The sky carries a weight that means snow is coming. The group has been preparing for this moment since the signs started, gradually packing supplies, eating through the stored food that can't be carried, repairing travel gear. When the decision comes to move down, everyone is ready. The descent takes 3 days, moving from the high meadows down through forested slopes to the middle elevations where winter will be survivable. They walk steadily, not rushing, but not lingering. The children ride on shoulders or backs when they tire. The elderly set the pace, moving as quickly as they can sustain. Behind them, the high country they're leaving will soon be buried under snow that won't melt until spring. At the new camp, the difference is immediate. The temperature is perhaps 15 degrees warmer than the high meadows, enough to change everything. Water flows liquid instead of freezing at night. The wind blows less fiercely. Southern exposure means the low winter sun reaches the ground for several hours each day, providing warmth that the high meadows never get once the cold truly settles. The group has camped here before, many winters. The spot is chosen carefully. Rock overhangs provide shelter from the worst weather. The creek runs year-round, fed by deep springs that don't freeze. Trees grow thick enough to break the wind, but open enough that snow doesn't accumulate in crushing depths. Game animals winter in this area. Deer and elk that have also moved down from the heights, following the same instinct that brought the people here. But this camp isn't permanent any more than the summer camp was. It's just the place that works for the cold months. The group knows they'll stay here until warmth returns, but stay is relative. They'll make short moves within this general area, following game that shifts location, moving when firewood near camp runs out, relocating when one spot becomes too worn or exposed. The temperature keeps dropping through early winter. On the coldest nights, it reaches 10 or 15 degrees below freezing. Inside the shelters, Bodies huddle close. The fire is kept burning through the night, someone always awake to feed it. Hides double layered with dried grass packed between provide insulation. Everyone sleeps in their warmest furs, often with heated stones wrapped in hides placed near their bodies. These cold nights test the group's preparation. If they hadn't moved down when they did, they'd be facing temperatures 20 or 30 degrees colder in the high meadows, with wind that cuts through any shelter. People would freeze. Children would die. The elderly wouldn't survive. The move wasn't optional. It was the difference between living and dying. By midwinter, the pattern is established. The days are short, the nights long. The group's activity slows to match the season. Hunting happens during the few warm hours of midday. Firewood gathering occupies much of the rest. Everyone else stays close to the shelter, working on tools and hides, telling stories, sleeping more than in summer. Calories are precious, and unnecessary movement wastes energy the body needs to stay warm. The snow that falls at this elevation is manageable. A few inches accumulate, melt partially, accumulate again. It never gets so deep that movement becomes impossible, but it changes how hunting works. Tracks show clearly in snow. Animals can't hide as easily, but they also move less predictably, staying bedded down during the worst weather, only moving when they must to feed. The group adjusts. They learn to hunt after fresh snow when tracks are newest. They learn which animals winter where, which bedding sites to check. The knowledge is specific to this location, this elevation, these particular valleys and slopes. It doesn't transfer to the high meadows or the lowlands. Each place has its own winter logic, and the group must know all of them. As winter deepens, the cold pushes everyone to stay even closer to camp. Journeys that would be easy in summer become serious undertakings. A hunt that goes badly, with no game found after hours of searching, means people return exhausted, cold, having burned energy they can't easily replace. The margin for error shrinks. Every decision about whether to go out or stay in gets weighed carefully. When the first signs of thaw arrive, longer days, snow melting faster than it accumulates, birds returning, the group reads them like instructions. Time to think about moving again. Not immediately, but soon. The lowlands will green first. Fish will run in the swollen creeks. Early plants will emerge. If the group stays in the winter camp too long, they'll miss the spring abundance in the valleys. If they move too early, they'll hit late storms without the protection of their established winter shelters. The timing is critical and never exactly the same. Some years spring comes early, other years winter holds on stubbornly. The group watches, discusses, remembers previous years. When the decision comes to move, it's based on collective knowledge of patterns learned across generations. They pack again, dismantle the shelters they'll rebuild next year, and head down slope toward the warming lowlands. The journey down happens in stages. They might camp at a middle elevation for a week while they wait for the lowlands to fully thaw. Moving too fast puts them in places where spring hasn't arrived yet, where food is still scarce and conditions are difficult. Moving too slow means missing the best weeks of spring abundance. They calibrate constantly, balancing speed against the land's readiness. When they finally reach the lowland spring camp, the contrast is dramatic. Where they left is still partially frozen, nights cold, plant growth just beginning. Here, flowers bloom. Trees show bright green leaves. Fish crowd the streams. The temperature at night drops only to just above freezing, and the days warm into comfortable ranges. The group sheds the heavy furs they've worn for months, feels the sun directly on skin, moves with energy that winter had drained away. But they know this place won't work in summer. As the season advances, the lowlands will become hot. Water sources will dwindle, insects will swarm. The same camps that are perfect in spring become miserable by midsummer. The seasonal cold pushed them down from the heights. The coming summer heat will push them back up. The group moves with these cycles, positioning themselves always where temperature is survivable, where the land gives rather than withholds. Some years, weather breaks the normal pattern. A late spring means the lowlands stay cold longer than expected, delaying the abundance. The group waits in the middle elevations, making short foraging trips down to check conditions, returning to the more sheltered camps until the lowlands truly warm. Other years, early heat arrives, and the group moves faster than usual, getting to the heights before the lowlands become uncomfortable. Occasionally, severe weather hits unexpectedly. A late spring blizzard catches the group partway through their ascent. They hunker down wherever they are, building hasty windbreaks, waiting out the storm. When it passes, they assess. Sometimes they continue upward. Sometimes they retreat to lower elevations. The plan adjusts to reality, and movement follows what works rather than what was expected. The constant push and pull of temperature creates a permanent restlessness. There's never a place that stays comfortable year-round. The high meadows are perfect in summer, deadly in winter. The lowland valleys are welcoming in spring and fall, unlivable during temperature extremes. The middle elevations work during shoulder seasons but aren't ideal for the peaks of summer or winter. The group circles through all of them, following the narrow band of livable conditions as it shifts with the seasons. This movement is exhausting over time. Every few months, the group packs and walks and establishes a new camp. Children grow up never staying anywhere longer than a season. Adults spend their lives in motion, responding to temperature the way plants respond to light. The elderly, who can remember 50 or 60 seasonal rounds, carry knowledge of hundreds of camps, dozens of migration routes, the detailed temperature patterns of an entire landscape. But the exhaustion is the price of survival. Groups that tried to stay in one place year-round didn't make it. The ones who stayed in the lowlands died of heat and thirst in summer. The ones who stayed in the heights froze in winter. The ones who stayed in middle elevations found resources insufficient in all seasons. Only the groups who moved, who followed the shifting zone of survivable temperature, who learned the seasonal round and committed to it, stayed alive long enough to pass their knowledge down. The cold that pushes south in winter and the heat that drives them up in summer aren't inconveniences to work around. They're forces that determine everything. The group's entire way of life, what they carry, what they build, where they go, how they organize their year, is shaped by temperature's demands. Movement isn't something they do despite the weather. Movement is their response to weather, the strategy that lets them survive in a world where no single place offers year-round comfort. And so they walk, up when it warms, down when it cools, circling through the elevations, following the conditions that permit life. The paths wear into the land over generations. Everyone knows the spring route, the summer route, the autumn descent, the winter camps. The knowledge is survival, the movement is life, and the temperature that drives it all is the invisible hand that keeps everyone forever in motion. Fire needs wood, and wood doesn't grow back fast enough. This simple fact shapes movement as powerfully as weather or water. The group camps in a place with trees all around, dead wood scattered beneath them, fallen branches everywhere. Gathering fuel takes minutes. An armload from just beyond the shelters, another from near the creek, a third from the edge of the clearing. Easy, but the group needs fire constantly. Cooking fires burn through the day. The central fire stays alive through every night, keeping cold and predators back. On bitter nights, multiple fires burn around the camp perimeter. Each fire consumes wood that took years to fall and dry. Each day's burning uses what the forest dropped over months or years. The math doesn't balance. After the first week, gathering wood requires walking a bit farther. The dead wood closest to camp is gone. After 2 weeks, the easy branches within a few minutes' walk are used up. Someone has to go a quarter-mile out, searching under trees, dragging back logs. After a month, the good wood lies so far from camp that gathering enough for one night takes half a day's work. The group knows this pattern. They've watched it happen at every camp their entire lives. When wood gathering starts taking longer than it should, when the children assigned to gather come back tired and carrying less, when the fire runs low because nobody wants to make another long trip, the equation has shifted. The camp location no longer makes sense. Moving resets everything. The new camp sits among trees that haven't been harvested. Dead wood lies everywhere again. Gathering becomes easy once more. The forest here has been dropping branches and falling trees for years without anyone to burn them. All that accumulated fuel becomes available, enough to sustain the group for weeks. But weeks isn't forever. The new camp will go through the same progression. Easy gathering, then longer walks, then wood becoming scarce enough to make staying difficult. The pattern repeats at every camp. It's as predictable as the seasons, and like the seasons, it demands response. When wood becomes hard to find, the group moves. The forest doesn't grow new fuel quickly enough to support a permanent group. A tree that dies and falls might provide firewood for several nights, but it took decades to grow. A branch that breaks in a storm and dries over a year burns in an hour. The rate of consumption vastly exceeds the rate of replenishment. Staying in one place means slowly depleting the wood supply until finally the forest around camp is stripped of everything burnable. Some camps are better than others for wood. Dense forests with lots of dead trees can support a group longer. Open areas with scattered trees run out quickly. The group learns which locations offer abundant fuel and which don't. The good spots might support them for 6 or 8 weeks. The poor spots might only work for 2 or 3. But even the best spots eventually exhaust their supply, and the group has to move. The type of wood matters too. Some trees drop branches readily and rot slowly, providing years of fuel. Others keep their branches until they fall entire, providing massive amounts of wood all at once, but then nothing for years. The group prefers camping near the reliable species, the ones that consistently provide the steady supply needed to keep fires burning year-round. In winter, the wood needs are even more intense. Fires burn larger and longer to combat the cold. The group goes through wood at double or triple the summer rate. A winter camp that might have enough wood for 2 months in summer runs out in 3 weeks in deep cold. This accelerates the need to move, even though winter movement is harder and riskier. The group tries to choose winter camps in areas with exceptional wood supplies, places where storms have knocked down many trees, where old stands are dying and providing abundant deadwood, where the forest is thick enough to sustain heavy use. But even these premium spots eventually give out. By late winter, the people are hauling logs from distances that barely make sense, working hard just to keep fire alive. When warmth returns and the group moves to spring camps, the relief includes wood as much as weather. The winter camp's wood is exhausted, but the spring camp has full supplies again. The gathering returns to the easy pattern, but the group remembers that this place too will run out. Every camp does. The question is only when, not if. Occasionally, the group returns to an old camp after a year or more away. The spot they left with its wood supply depleted has recovered slightly. New branches have fallen. A tree or two has died. There's fuel again, though not as much as a completely unused spot would have. The forest has partially regenerated, proving that movement works. By leaving, they give the land time to accumulate new resources. By returning after a gap, they can harvest again. This creates a pattern of rotation. The group doesn't just move from camp to camp linearly. They move in cycles, returning to previous camps after enough time has passed for recovery. The seasonal round brings them back to the same general areas year after year, but they might camp in slightly different spots within those areas, spreading their impact, letting heavily used locations rest. But the rotation isn't fast enough for true sustainability at any single spot. Even camps revisited after a year still don't have the wood supply they had when first used. The forest needs multiple years to fully recover. The group takes from many places, lets them rest, takes again, always moving before depletion becomes critical. It works, but only because they never stay. The search for wood also leads the group to specific features. River valleys where floods deposit driftwood. Slopes where storms knock down trees regularly. Areas where lightning strikes cause occasional fires that kill trees but leave them standing to fall over years. These places become known for reliable wood supplies and feature prominently in the seasonal round. But even abundant areas have limits. A river valley full of driftwood can supply a group for a few months. Then the wood is gone, and the river needs years to deposit more. The group moves on, maybe coming back eventually, but not soon enough to exhaust the location permanently. The movement prevents that final depletion that would ruin the spot forever. In some years, wood becomes the limiting factor before food does. The hunting remains good, plants are still available, water flows fine, but the wood is gone. The group moves despite having other resources, because without fire they can't cook meat, can't stay warm, can't keep predators away at night. Wood is non-negotiable. Other times, wood runs out simultaneously with other resources. The hunting declines as wood becomes scarce. Plants get harvested down just as gathering fuel becomes difficult. Everything depletes together, all the signs pointing to the same conclusion: time to move. The camp has given what it can, and now it needs rest. The group carries fire with them when they move, not burning torches, but coals wrapped carefully in bark or hide, insulated with ash. Keeping the coals alive through the journey means the new camp has fire immediately. Starting fire from scratch, striking sparks from stone, nursing them into flame, is difficult and not always successful. Carried coals guarantee continuity. This carried fire links camps across the landscape. The flames burning at the new camp are descended from the flames that burned at the old one, which descended from the one before that. The fire itself is a kind of constant, even as locations change. It's one of the few things the group doesn't have to leave behind. Everything else, shelters, heavy tools, cached supplies, gets abandoned, but fire travels with them. The carried coals need feeding on the journey. Every few hours someone unwraps them, blows gently, adds tiny pieces of fuel. Letting them die would be a disaster. The person carrying fire holds one of the group's most essential possessions. Children learn young to respect this, to understand that the glowing ember is as important as food or water. When the group arrives at a new camp, the first task is building up the carried coals into a proper fire. A small fire first, just enough to establish, then building it larger as more wood gets gathered. The ease of gathering at a new camp makes this satisfying. Wood is abundant again. The fire can grow large. The sense of plenty returns, even though everyone knows it's temporary. The cycle continues endlessly. Use wood until it becomes scarce. Move to where wood is abundant. Use that wood until it too becomes scarce. Move again. The forest provides, but only if the group never stops moving. Stay in one place and the forest becomes bare ground. Keep moving, and the forest always has something to give. The choice isn't really a choice. Movement is mandatory, written into the basic physics of how fast wood accumulates versus how fast it burns. And so the fires burn camp after camp, season after season, year after year. Each fire consumes the forest slowly, and each move gives the forest time to grow back. The group's survival depends on this balance, taking but not depleting, moving before destruction, returning after recovery. The fire demands it, the wood supplies it, the movement connects them both into a sustainable pattern that only works because nowhere ever becomes home for long. The deer graze in the meadow at dawn, visible from the camp's edge, easy targets. The hunters take 3 in 2 days, the meat more than the group can eat fresh. They dry strips over fires, smoke some, eat the organs immediately. For a week, food is abundant, but the deer remember. They associate this meadow with danger. The surviving animals move their feeding grounds to the next valley, somewhere humans haven't hunted recently. They don't reason it through, they just respond to pressure, drifting away from the scent of death. By the second week, hunting requires more effort. The hunters leave at dawn, walk for hours to find game that's moved farther out. By the third week, they're covering serious distances, spending all day hunting for animals that have learned to avoid this area. The hunt still works, but barely. The energy spent tracking and pursuing begins to approach the calories the meat provides. The equation tightens. The group sees this pattern constantly. Any location, once hunted for a few weeks, becomes harder to hunt. The animals aren't gone from the region entirely, they've just shifted their patterns to avoid human presence. They feed at different times, use different trails, stay farther from where humans camp. It's not conscious strategy on their part, but it works. The individual animals that avoid humans survive. The ones that don't, die. Selection happens quickly. Moving camp moves the hunting pressure to new ground where animals haven't adjusted yet. The first few days at a new camp often bring easy hunting. Game hasn't learned to avoid this area. They follow their normal patterns, feeding at their usual times, using established trails. The hunters succeed quickly, bringing back meat without spending all day searching. The group eats well, but already the clock is ticking. The animals here will learn too. This isn't about hunting a species to extinction, it's about hunting an area to wariness. The deer, elk, rabbits, whatever the group depends on, they're still out there, just farther away, more cautious, harder to approach. A camp that's been occupied for a month has a dead zone around it where prey animals have learned to stay alert or stay away entirely. The size of this zone grows over time. At first, it might only extend a mile or 2 from camp. After a month, it might be 5 miles. After 2 months, the hunters are walking half a day just to reach areas where game acts normally. At that point, moving camp 5 miles resets the pattern. The hunters are back in productive territory, and the exhausted zone around the old camp begins to recover. Recovery happens, but slowly. Animals drift back over weeks or months once human presence disappears. The scents fade, the sounds of camp activity cease, the danger signals dissipate. Eventually, game returns to normal patterns in the abandoned area. But this takes time, more time than the group can afford to wait while staying in one place. The group learns which animals pressure most easily. Rabbits and small game adapt slowly, staying in their territories even under hunting pressure. They're easier to keep catching because they can't migrate far, but they're also small. A group of 25 people needs more than rabbits. The large animals, deer, elk, bison, provide the calories that really matter, and these animals move readily, shifting their ranges to avoid danger. Following these large animals means the group must move too, not constantly chasing them step by step, but repositioning every few weeks to stay near their shifting grazing areas. The animals follow food and water and safety. The humans follow the animals. It's a dance where the prey leads and the predator follows at a careful distance. Some seasons make this more intense. In winter, large animals concentrate in areas with available food and manageable snow depth. They can't spread out as much. The group camps near these winter ranges, and hunting stays productive longer than usual. But even in winter, after weeks of pressure, the game shifts within its limited range, moving to the far edges, forcing hunters to travel farther. Spring scatter changes everything. As snow melts and plants green up, the concentrated herds disperse across the landscape. What was a large group of elk in one valley becomes small bands scattered across multiple valleys. The hunting becomes harder not because the animals are wary, but because they're spread thin. The group has to move to follow the larger concentrations, finding places where game density remains high enough to make hunting worth the effort. Summer brings different patterns. Many large animals move to high elevations to escape heat and insects. If the group wants to keep hunting them effectively, they must move upward too. Staying in the lowlands means either hunting without large game or spending days traveling up and back. Moving camp to the heights makes sense. The hunting pressure around camp will build again, but at least the camp is where the animals are. Autumn sees migrations downward. The elk and deer begin moving to their winter ranges. The group often moves with them, timing their own descent to stay near the herds. This is when hunting can be excellent. The animals are moving predictably, focused on reaching their destinations, less concerned with avoiding humans. But this window is brief. Once the herds settle in their winter areas, the pressure and avoidance pattern begins again. The group also hunts opportunistically. Not every meal comes from planned hunts. Sometimes an animal is spotted near camp and taken quickly, but this opportunistic hunting only works early in a camp's occupation. After a few weeks, nothing comes near camp anymore. The opportunistic chances dry up, leaving only the deliberate hunts that require travel. Predator competition adds another layer. Wolves, lions, and other carnivores hunt the same game. They also pressure the herds, making them warier and more scattered. A valley that seems perfect for camp might have a pack of wolves already established, making hunting far harder than expected. The group either competes, which is dangerous and inefficient, or moves to an area with less predator pressure. Sometimes the group deliberately hunts in areas where predators have made a kill recently. The scent of death is already there, and the prey animals are already alert. Human hunting doesn't make things much worse in the short term, but these areas don't stay productive long. Once thoroughly disturbed by both predators and humans, game abandons them entirely for weeks. The seasonality of prey also forces movement. Some animals are only available at certain times. Fish runs happen in specific weeks. Salmon push upstream in autumn, and the group times their movement to be at the best fishing spots exactly when the run peaks. Miss the window, and that entire food source vanishes for a year. Birds migrate through certain areas at certain seasons. The group positions themselves to take advantage, moving to be where the abundance is when it arrives. Hunting technology and methods adapt to this mobile lifestyle. The group can't build elaborate traps that require weeks of construction and maintenance. Everything must be portable or quickly built. Spears, bows if they have them, throwing sticks, tools that travel. At each camp, they might construct simple game drives or temporary blinds near water sources, but these are abandoned when the group moves. The hunters themselves become extraordinarily skilled at reading sign. Tracks tell not just which animal passed, but when, how fast, whether it was alert or relaxed. Broken branches, disturbed soil, fresh droppings, all inform the hunt. This knowledge develops because the group is always moving through new areas, always needing to quickly assess where game is and how to hunt it in unfamiliar terrain. Over years, the seasonal round creates a rhythm where the group knows the hunting patterns of their entire territory. This valley is good for deer in spring, but they move out by summer. That ridge holds elk in autumn. These wetlands attract waterfowl during migration. The knowledge is detailed and location-specific, earned through generations of moving through the same general territory year after year. But knowledge doesn't eliminate the basic problem. Stay anywhere too long, and hunting becomes difficult. Even the best locations exhaust their easy hunting within weeks. The group might return to that location next year after the animals have forgotten and resettled, but they can't stay continuously. The movement isn't optional. It's the only way to maintain access to game animals that adapt quickly to hunting pressure. Young people learn this as they learn to hunt. The old hunters tell them, "Take what we need, not everything available. Move before the hunting becomes desperate. Let the animals recover." Not because of any conservation ethic exactly, but because it works. Groups that overhunt and stay put end up starving. Groups that move regularly keep finding productive hunting. The meat itself, once taken, creates another pressure to move. Butchering a large animal produces scraps, bones, blood, all of which attract scavengers. Wolves, foxes, ravens, and others learn that human camps mean potential food. They circle closer, becoming bolder. A camp that's made several kills has a growing cloud of scavengers around it, competing for scraps, creating noise and disturbance, sometimes threatening. Moving to a new camp leaves that scavenger pressure behind. The new location starts clean, without the accumulated scavengers and predators that learn to associate human camps with food. Over time, that association builds again, and eventually moving becomes attractive partly to escape the camp followers who've learned to exploit human kills. The hunting grounds themselves show the impact of use. Trails get worn from repeated hunter passage. The vegetation gets disturbed. Blood scent lingers in soil. These accumulated signs make the area feel used, depleted, even if plenty of game exists farther out. Moving brings psychological as well as practical relief. The new camp's surroundings feel fresh, unstressed, full of possibility. Some locations simply can't support sustained hunting. A small valley might have decent game initially, but not enough to feed a group for more than a week or two. The hunters know this from looking at the terrain, estimating game density, comparing to other places. They might use such locations as temporary camps while traveling between better sites, but they don't plan to stay long. The hunting won't support it. Other locations are so rich they support the group for months. A major river valley with diverse habitat, multiple game species, good cover for hunting. These places become core camps in the seasonal round. But even these premium locations eventually see their hunting decline. The difference is timing. A poor site becomes difficult in days. A rich site takes weeks or months. But the pattern is the same. Eventually, staying means harder hunting, and moving means easier hunting. The group balances hunting pressure against all the other factors. Sometimes hunting is still good, but firewood is gone, so they move. Sometimes firewood is fine, but hunting has gotten difficult, so they move. Usually multiple pressures build together. Hunting declining, firewood scarce, water flow dropping, all pointing toward the same conclusion. When they move, they often head toward areas where hunting should be good based on season and game movements. If deer are calving, go near calving grounds. If elk are rutting, go where that happens. If bison are migrating, position the camp along their route. This active planning means the group isn't just moving away from depleted areas, but toward productive ones, maximizing the reset that each move provides. The exhaustion of hunting grounds, more than almost any other single factor, keeps the group mobile. Food is the most essential resource. Water can sometimes be carried. Wood can be gathered from farther away if necessary. But meat requires animals, and animals avoid humans who hunt them. The only solution is movement. Constant, planned, unavoidable movement that keeps the group positioned where game is still available and not yet wary. And so they walk, following herds at the largest scale, tracking seasonal game movements, shifting camp every few weeks to find areas where animals haven't learned to avoid them yet, moving before desperation, before the hunting becomes impossible, before starvation becomes a real threat. The movement is the strategy. The animals move, so the people move. It's been this way for longer than anyone can remember, and it will continue as long as survival depends on hunting game that learns and adapts and moves away from danger. The sun's path across the sky draws the year like a map. Each season brings its own abundance and scarcity, and the group follows these changes as surely as water follows gravity. Spring isn't just warmer weather. It's fish running upstream, birds nesting, plants sprouting from ground that was frozen solid weeks before. The group moves to where spring's bounty appears, positioning themselves to harvest what each part of the season offers. At the lowest elevations, spring arrives first, sometimes in late winter. The group camps near rivers swollen with snowmelt. Fish push upstream in numbers that seem impossible. The water churns with their movement. For 2 or 3 weeks, fishing is almost effortless. Hands reach into shallows and come up with fish. Simple weirs across side channels trap them by the dozens. The group eats fresh fish daily, smokes more for later, processes the oil for storage. But the fish run doesn't last. It peaks, then declines, then ends. The fish that survived move on to their spawning grounds upstream or return to deeper water. The easy fishing window closes. The group could stay and fish the harder way, but why? Other resources are coming into season elsewhere. The plants along the riverbank are starting to green. Small shoots push up through leaf litter, edible, nutritious, abundant for a brief window before they mature into tougher, less palatable forms. The group moves to where these plants are at their peak. Not far, just a different part of the valley, where aspect and soil bring plants up at the right time. They camp and gather intensely. The young greens go into every meal. Some get dried for later use. It's work, but it's productive work. The land is giving freely right now. As spring progresses, the group moves gradually upslope. They're following spring itself, which advances up the mountains like a slow wave. What already flowered and finished in the lowlands is just beginning at higher elevations. The group stays in the sweet spot, where spring is neither too early, nothing ready yet, nor too late, everything already gone. This upward movement takes weeks, each camp a few hundred feet higher than the last. At each stop, they find the resources that define spring at that elevation. Certain roots reaching perfect size, bird eggs in nests at peak abundance, young animals born recently and easier to hunt. The timing is everything. Arrive too early and the resources aren't ready. Arrive too late and someone else, another group, other animals, has already taken them. By early summer, the group reaches the high meadows. Down in the lowlands, it's already getting hot and dry. Water sources are shrinking. The spring plants have matured and aren't good eating anymore. Insects swarm in the warming air. But up here at elevation, conditions are perfect. Water flows cold from snowmelt. Meadow plants are lush. Temperature stays comfortable. The group camps and settles into the summer pattern. Summer at height offers abundance but also vulnerability. This is where they'll stay longest, maybe 8 or 10 weeks if conditions hold. The hunting is good because large game moves up to escape lowland heat. The meadows provide edible plants in variety. The long days allow extended gathering and hunting hours, but everyone knows this isn't permanent. The season is turning even as they harvest it. Certain plants only produce during specific summer weeks. Berries ripen in stages, first the low-growing ones, then bushes, then higher trees. The group times their gathering to each, moving between patches as different varieties reach perfect ripeness. Miss the window and the berries are either unripe or already dried up and falling. Get the timing right and they harvest abundantly, eating fresh and drying quantities for winter. The group reads the signs of coming autumn carefully. Berries finishing, birds beginning to gather in flocks, preparing to migrate. The angle of sunlight changing, nights cooling. These signs don't come all at once, but they accumulate. The elders, who've seen 40 or 50 seasonal cycles, recognize the patterns. They start suggesting it's time to think about moving down. The descent from summer range must be timed perfectly. Leave too early, and they miss the last of summer's abundance. Leave too late, and early snow could trap them at elevation with no food and no way down with the children and elderly. Most years they judge it right, but everyone has stories of groups who misjudged. Some caught by early blizzards, some who stayed too long and faced desperate shortage. They moved down in stages just as they moved up, but autumn's pace is faster. Spring took months to follow upward. Autumn gives only weeks. The cold advances more quickly than warmth did. The group camps briefly at each elevation, harvesting what autumn offers there. Nuts falling from trees, roots that are perfect for digging now, late berries, animals that are fat from summer and haven't yet grown wary from autumn hunting pressure. By late autumn, they're back in lower valleys, but not the same camps used in spring. These are autumn-specific locations, chosen for different resources. The salmon run happens here, the oak trees drop acorns in this area, the deer concentrate in this valley during rut. The knowledge is precise, this place for this purpose at this time. The seasonal command isn't just move, it's move here, now, for this. The work becomes urgent in autumn. Winter is coming, and preparation matters. Meat needs to be dried and smoked. Hides need to be processed into winter clothing. Plant foods need to be gathered and stored. The comfortable abundance of summer shifts into determined preparation for scarcity. The days are shorter, the work intense. Every calm day counts because storms could arrive any time. When the decision comes to move to winter camp, it's based on hard signs. The first real freeze. Snow at higher elevations moving down toward where they're camped. Animals migrating to their winter ranges. The group packs and moves to the sheltered valleys that will be winter home. These sites are chosen years ago, proven over generations. Rock overhangs, southern exposure, reliable water, nearby wood, winter game. They're not perfect, but they're survivable. Winter locks the group into relative stillness. They can't move far or easily. The deep, cold, shorter days and snow cover make movement dangerous and exhausting. But relative stillness isn't total stillness. Even in winter, they make short moves, following game that shifts within its winter range, moving when firewood near camp runs out, relocating when a storm damages shelters beyond easy repair. Spring returns eventually. Snow melts, water flows, plants emerge. The group is ready to move again, to leave the confinement of winter camp and spread out into the landscape. The first move of spring feels like release. They walk toward the lowlands where spring arrives first, where fish run, where the cycle begins again. This seasonal round defines existence. The group doesn't decide when to move based on whim. The seasons command it. Spring says, go to lowlands, fish the runs, gather the greens. Summer says, move to heights, hunt the meadows, harvest berries in sequence. Autumn says, descend quickly, prepare intensely, gather nuts, and hunt fat animals. Winter says, shelter in place, endure, wait for spring. Each season offers specific resources in specific places. Missing the timing means missing food. Trying to stay in one place year-round means facing seasons it can't handle. Summer heat with no water, winter cold with no shelter, spring floods, autumn storms. The group survives by moving with the seasons, being where each season's abundance appears. The children grow up learning this rhythm before they learn anything else. They know spring means moving upward, autumn means moving down. They know which camps are for which seasons. They know the signs that tell when to move. By the time they're adults, the seasonal round is instinctive. They don't question it any more than they question breathing. The knowledge required is immense. Not just general patterns, but specific details. This plant is ready to harvest when those other plants finish blooming. That animal gives birth in this valley during this moon. These fish arrive 3 days after the ice breaks on the high lakes. The information accumulates across generations, refined constantly, memorized by everyone. The group sometimes encounters others following different seasonal rounds in the same general territory. The routes and timing are staggered so groups don't compete too directly. One group uses the western valleys in spring while another uses the eastern. They swap in summer, each moving to areas the other has left. This informal sharing works because everyone respects the seasonal patterns and doesn't try to stay in premium locations beyond their season. When the seasonal round gets disrupted by unusual weather, by resource failure, by conflict with other groups, the group struggles. They might skip a planned camp because late snow makes it unreachable. They might have to use a secondary location because the primary site's resources failed. But they always try to get back to the established pattern because it works. Generations of trial and error have refined these routes and timing. The seasonal round isn't just practical, it's beautiful in its own way. The group witnesses every phase of the land's year. They see spring arrive at every elevation. They watch summer peak in the high meadows. They harvest autumn's abundance across multiple zones. They endure winter in the sheltered places. They know the land's rhythm intimately because they move through it constantly. But the beauty comes at a cost. The group never rests for long. As soon as they settle into one camp, the season is already advancing toward the time they'll need to leave. The comfort of arrival carries the knowledge of departure. Nothing is permanent. Every camp is temporary. The seasons command movement, and movement is survival. Still, this rhythm provides structure. The group knows what's coming. Spring follows winter. Summer follows spring. The pattern repeats reliably. Within the uncertainty of weather and hunting luck and all the other variables, the seasonal round provides a framework. Move here in spring. Move there in summer. The commands are clear. Following them keeps the group alive, and so they follow. Year after year, generation after generation, moving with the season's rhythm. Upward as warmth advances, downward as cold descends. To the rivers when fish run, to the meadows when plants bloom, to the valleys when winter demands shelter, the seasons command, the people obey, and the constant movement traces a pattern across the land that's older than memory and will continue as long as seasons turn and people need to eat. The shapes move across the horizon in numbers that seem endless. Reindeer, thousands of them, flowing north like water finding its course. The group watches from the ridge, seeing the herd pass below. This migration happens every spring, the animals moving toward summer grazing grounds hundreds of miles north. And the group knows, where the reindeer go, we must follow. The herd doesn't move in a straight line. They spread across the landscape, following routes carved by generations of their kind. They move toward areas where lichens and plants will be abundant in summer, toward calving grounds their species has used for thousands of years. The paths they take are predictable year to year, varying only slightly with weather and conditions. The group positions themselves along these routes, not directly in the path where they disturb the migration, but close enough to hunt effectively. They move their camp every few days, paralleling the herd's direction, staying within a day's walk of where the animals will be. This following can last weeks, covering 50 or 60 miles total, the group pacing themselves to match the reindeer's steady progress north. Hunting is good during migration. The reindeer are focused on moving, less alert to predators. The group takes what they need: young animals, weaker ones that lag behind, occasionally a strong one when opportunity allows. but they're careful not to take too many. The herd must remain healthy enough to return south in autumn when the group will follow them again. As summer peaks, the reindeer scatter across their northern range, spreading out to graze. The group doesn't follow them all the way to the far north. Instead, they stop at familiar summer camps within their territory, places they return to each year. They hunt other animals through the summer months, gather plants, fish the streams, but they remember where the reindeer went. In autumn, the herd will return, and the group will be positioned to meet them. The autumn migration south brings the reindeer back through the same general routes. The group watches for them, seeing the advance scouts first, then the main herd. This time, the animals are fat from summer grazing, their meat rich and nourishing. The group follows them south, hunting along the way, preserving meat for winter. The herd's movement dictates the group's movement. They can't hunt reindeer if they're not where the reindeer are. By late autumn, the reindeer reach their southern range where they'll winter, scattered across areas with less snow and accessible food. The group camps nearby, their own winter location chosen partly based on where the reindeer winter. Through the cold months, hunting continues, but it's harder. The scattered animals are more alert. The deep snow makes tracking difficult. But the group survives, taking enough to supplement stored food. When spring returns, the cycle begins again. The reindeer gather, preparing for their northern migration. The group prepares too, knowing the pattern, ready to follow. This is life, moving with the animals, tracing their paths, depending on their predictable patterns. Without the reindeer's migration, the group would face starvation. The animals provide food, hides, tools made from bone and antler. Following them isn't optional. Other herds follow different patterns. Bison on the plains move with weather and grass growth, not in long migrations, but in shifts between grazing areas. The groups that hunt bison live differently than the reindeer followers, but the principle is the same. The animals move, so the people must move. Stay in one place and the bison drift away. Follow their movements and meat remains available. In some regions, mammoths travel in smaller family groups rather than massive herds. These giants move more slowly, covering less distance, but they still move. Groups that specialize in mammoth hunting follow these family groups across territories that might span 30 or 40 miles. When a mammoth is taken, it provides enormous amounts of meat, enough to sustain the group for weeks. But eventually, the mammoth family moves on, and the group must follow or find other prey. Elk move between elevations seasonally, up to high meadows in summer, down to protected valleys in winter. The groups that hunt elk are often the same ones following the seasonal round between elevations. The elk's movements and the seasonal plant cycles align, both driven by temperature and snow. Following elk means following summer up and winter down, harvesting both animal and plant resources in the same movements. Even small migrations matter. Fish runs, though brief, require groups to be at specific rivers at specific times. Salmon pushing upstream in autumn, shad running in spring. These create abundance windows that can't be missed. Groups time their movements to be at the best fishing spots exactly when fish are most abundant. Miss it by a week, and the opportunity is gone for a year. Birds migrate twice yearly, and some groups position themselves along these flyways. Waterfowl following rivers and coastlines, plovers crossing inland areas, raptors riding thermals south. At peak migration times, birds can provide significant food, but the timing is precise. The flights last days or weeks, not months. The group must be positioned correctly when the birds come through. The knowledge of animal movements becomes as important as any tool. Elders carry in their memories the routes, the timing, the variations. They know that reindeer usually appear in this valley during the third week after snow melts. They know elk gather in this basin just before the first heavy snow. They know salmon runs strongest during the full moon in the 9th month. This knowledge, accumulated and refined across generations, guides the group's entire yearly movement. Young hunters learn by following, observing, absorbing. They walk with the group year after year, seeing the same patterns repeat. By adulthood, they can predict animal movements almost instinctively. They read signs in the landscape, tracks becoming fresher, animals moving all in one direction, birds gathering, that tell them a migration is beginning. They know to alert the group. Time to move, the herds are moving. Sometimes the patterns fail. A harsh winter kills many reindeer, and the spring migration is smaller than expected. The group must adapt, hunting other animals, gathering more plants, perhaps moving to areas they normally wouldn't use. But these disruptions are the exception. Most years, the animals follow their ancient patterns, and the people follow them. Following herds also means encountering other predators following the same animals. Wolves track reindeer just as humans do. The group sometimes sees wolf packs paralleling their own movement, both species hunting the same prey. Usually, there's room for both. The herds are large enough, but sometimes competition is direct, and the group must decide whether to confront the wolves, avoid them, or move to a different part of the herd's range. The constant following creates an intimacy with animals that's hard to imagine today. The group knows individual reindeer by their markings, watching them across seasons. They notice which ones are getting old, which young ones are strong. They understand the herd's rhythms, when they rest, when they move, how they react to weather. This knowledge isn't just practical, it's a relationship. The people depend on the animals, follow them, know them, live alongside them. But the relationship is predator and prey, never equal. The group takes from the herds constantly. If they stayed in one place, they'd hunt the local animals to wariness or local extinction. By following migrations, they spread their hunting pressure across hundreds of miles, never depleting any one area completely. The movement that lets them survive also lets the herds survive. Both species persist because neither stays still. The rhythm of following becomes second nature. The group doesn't think we should follow the reindeer north. They simply move north in spring because that's when the reindeer move, and that's what survival requires. The decision isn't conscious anymore. It's woven into the pattern of life as deeply as sleeping and waking. And at night, camped along the migration route, the group can hear the reindeer settling in the darkness. Thousands of them, breathing, moving, grazing. The sound is constant, a reminder that the animals are there, that tomorrow's hunting will provide, that following was the right choice. The sound is also a promise. As long as the herds move and the group follows, survival continues. Stop following and survival stops too. So they follow. North in spring, south in autumn, east after one herd, west after another, following the migrations that feed them, following the patterns older than human memory, following because movement is survival and stillness is death. The animals move, so the people move. It's the agreement that sustains both, written not in words but in footsteps, crossing the land year after year, season after season, migration after migration. The camp has been in place for 5 weeks now. The shelters are solid, the fire pit is deep, the area around feels familiar, but something else has become familiar too, the smell. Human waste accumulates at the designated spots downwind from camp. Butchering sites from successful hunts are marked by bones, scraps, and blood-soaked ground. The trash heap of discarded materials grows daily. All of it starts to reek in the warm weather. Flies swarm thick in the afternoons. They cluster on the waste areas, then spread to the camp, landing on food, on faces, on everything. At night, scavengers creep closer. foxes, ravens, wolves. They've learned that this camp means scraps and remains. They grow bolder each day, less frightened of the humans who created the abundance they're exploiting. The group notices all of this. The smell that wasn't there in the first week is unavoidable in the fifth. The insects that were minor nuisance have become constant irritation. The scavengers that stayed distant now lurk at the camp's edges, waiting. The place that felt clean and new when they arrived feels used, dirty, contaminated by their own presence. Disease follows waste. Someone develops a stomach sickness, then another. The source might be contaminated water. The creek runs past the waste areas before reaching the camp's water-gathering spot. Or it might be flies carrying illness from refuse to food. The connection isn't understood in modern terms, but the result is clear. Staying too long in one place makes people sick. The ground itself changes. Paths between shelters become worn into muddy ruts. The vegetation near camp dies from constant trampling. The forest floor that was covered in leaves and plants when they arrived is now bare dirt in a widening circle around the camp. The area looks used up, exhausted, marked by human occupation in ways that can't be quickly fixed. At night, the smell bothers everyone. Even though waste is kept downwind, when the wind shifts, it carries the stench directly into camp. People wake choking on the smell. Children complain. Adults bear it silently, but with growing discomfort. The camp that was comfortable has become unpleasant. Nobody says it directly, but everyone thinks it. We've been here too long. The decision to move gains support as the problems accumulate. Yes, the hunting is harder than it was. Yes, the firewood gathering takes longer. But also, this place smells bad now. The flies are unbearable. Someone's child is sick again. The scavengers came right into camp last night. Movement isn't just about finding fresh resources. It's about leaving behind the waste that makes staying unbearable. When the group packs to leave, they don't try to clean up. There's no removing the accumulated waste, no restoring the trampled ground, no erasing the signs of occupation. They simply leave. They walk away from the smell, the flies, the contaminated areas, the used-up ground. Behind them, the camp sits as a monument to what happens when humans stay too long in one place. Nature will reclaim it eventually. Rain will wash things clean. Scavengers will consume the organic waste. Plants will grow back over the trampled ground. But that process takes time. Months, even years. The group can't wait for it. They need a clean camp now, not eventually. So they move to where human waste hasn't accumulated, where the ground is still covered in vegetation, where water runs pure and air smells of forest instead of decay. The new camp feels dramatically better immediately. Fresh air, clean water. No flies except the normal number that occur naturally. No scavengers circling. The relief is physical and psychological. The group spreads out the shelters a bit more than last time, remembering how the tight cluster at the old camp contributed to waste buildup. They designate waste areas farther from camp, but they also know these measures just delay the inevitable. Eventually, this camp too will accumulate waste, and they'll need to move again. The pattern repeats endlessly. Arrive at a clean place, occupy it, generate waste, watch the waste accumulate until it becomes problematic, move to a new clean place. The group can't prevent waste. They're humans. They eat, they butcher animals, they discard worn-out materials. What they can do is move before the waste becomes overwhelming, before disease spreads, before the camp becomes truly unlivable. In winter, waste accumulates slower. The cold suppresses smell and decomposition. Flies aren't active. Scavengers are less bold. Winter camps can be occupied longer, partly because waste doesn't create the same immediate problems. But even in winter, accumulation happens. By late winter, the designated areas are thoroughly used, and the spring thaw will make everything that's been frozen start to decompose rapidly. The group knows to move before the thaw, leaving before the concentrated waste of months starts to reek. Summer brings the fastest waste accumulation. Heat accelerates decomposition. Flies breed rapidly. Scavengers are active and numerous. A summer camp might only be usable for 3 or 4 weeks before waste becomes a serious problem. The group adjusts their expectations seasonally, planning shorter stays in warm months, longer stays when cold slows the processes of decay. The waste problem also limits group size. A band of 15 people creates half the waste of a group of 30. Larger groups reach the waste threshold faster, forcing more frequent moves. This creates pressure for groups to stay relatively small, not just because of food supply, but because bigger groups dirty their camps faster and have to move more often. The logistics of constantly moving large numbers of people gets exhausting. Some camps are reused despite previous waste accumulation. When the group returns to a site used last year, they often find that nature has cleaned it reasonably well. The waste is gone, consumed by scavengers, decomposed into soil, dispersed by rain. The camp is usable again, but they never return too quickly. A camp occupied for 2 months needs at least a year to recover. Return too soon, and remnants of waste remain, shortening the usable time before new waste becomes problematic. The relationship between waste and movement is simple but inflexible. Stay long enough and you'll foul your own living space. The solution is movement. Leave before the fouling becomes severe. Let nature clean what you left behind. Return only after sufficient time has passed. This isn't wisdom or strategy, it's necessity. Groups that tried to stay despite accumulating waste suffered disease, discomfort, and higher mortality. Children learn about waste management as early as they learn anything practical. Where to go, where not to go, why waste areas are avoided, why flies must be kept away from food. But they also learn the bigger lesson. No matter how careful they are, staying too long means living in filth. The solution isn't better waste management. The solution is leaving. And so movement driven by waste becomes another rhythm, not as predictable as seasons or as dramatic as following herds, but just as mandatory. When the camp starts to smell, when flies swarm thick, when scavengers become a problem, when sickness appears. These are signs as clear as exhausted hunting grounds or depleted firewood. The camp has given what it can give, and now it's giving back what the group has left behind. Waste, smell, contamination. Time to move. The group walks away, and with each step the air smells cleaner. By the time they're a mile from the old camp, the difference is remarkable. No flies following, no stench on the breeze. The children stop complaining. Adults breathe easier. The new camp, when established, feels like a gift, simply because it doesn't reek of human occupation. This cycle of fouling and leaving shapes how the group thinks about places. No location is permanent because every location becomes unlivable if you stay. The camp that feels perfect on arrival will feel contaminated on departure. This isn't failure or poor planning. It's the inevitable result of humans living in one spot, generating waste and lacking the technology to manage it effectively. And so waste, humble and unpleasant as the topic is, joins the list of forces that keep the group moving. Food runs out, water dries up, wood becomes scarce, hunting declines, seasons change, and waste accumulates. Each reason alone might be managed. Together, they create an irresistible pressure. Move, always move. Never stay so long that the land becomes poisoned by your presence. The shelters stand solid after 3 weeks of work. Wooden frames covered with hides, grass packed between layers for insulation, the whole structure angled to shed rain and block wind. They've built well, using techniques perfected over generations. The shelters are warm, dry, comfortable, the best they've made in months. But already, small problems appear. A hide develops a tear where the frame presses against it. Rain finds a gap where two hides overlap. The grass insulation, once fluffy and effective, compresses and loses its warmth-holding ability. The wooden frame members, held together with cordage and friction, begin to loosen as materials dry and shrink. The group repairs what they can. A patch over the torn hide, more grass stuffed into the gap, retying the frame members. It works for a while, but shelters are like living things. They're born, they age, they eventually fail. And unlike living things, shelters can't repair themselves. Every day brings new small deterioration. By the second month, the repairs become constant. Something always needs attention. A windstorm tears off a section of covering. Heavy rain reveals a new leak. The frame member that was retied last week comes loose again. Maintaining the shelters takes as much time as building them did initially. At some point, the calculation shifts. Would it be easier to move and build fresh than to keep fixing what's breaking? The materials themselves have limits. Hides last maybe one season of constant use before they rot, especially if they're getting wet regularly. The cordage that holds everything together weakens with exposure to weather. The wooden frame members, if not perfectly dry when used, warp and crack. The grass insulation becomes home to insects, gets damp and moldy, loses effectiveness, even when still present. Some camps can be maintained longer than others. A shelter built under a rock overhang, protected from direct weather, lasts much longer than one built in the open. A winter camp where everything stays frozen doesn't deteriorate as fast as a summer camp where warmth and humidity accelerate rot. The group learns where they can build to last and where structures will be temporary no matter how well constructed. But even the best-built shelter in the most protected location eventually wears out. The hide that was waterproof becomes porous. The frame that was solid becomes shaky. The insulation that was warm becomes useless. When this happens, the group faces a choice: gather materials and rebuild here, or move to a new camp where building fresh makes more sense. Often, moving makes more sense. The old camp's surroundings are already depleted. Wood used up, game pressured, waste accumulated. Building new shelters in a exhausted camp means staying in a place that's already becoming unlivable. Better to move to a new location where resources are fresh and build shelters there. The materials left behind aren't wasted. They've served their purpose. The camp provided shelter for as long as it could. The group doesn't build with permanence in mind, because permanence isn't possible. They build for the season, maybe 2 seasons if lucky. They use materials that are available locally, that can be worked quickly, that provide adequate shelter without requiring enormous effort. Heavy construction, complex joinery, foundations, none of that makes sense for people who know they'll be leaving in weeks or months. This creates a building style that's deliberately temporary. Light frames that can be assembled in days. Hide coverings that can be removed and carried if they're still good. Nothing invested so deeply that leaving it behind feels like loss. The group's skill isn't in making shelters that last forever, but in making adequate shelters quickly, repeatedly, in varying conditions and locations. Children learn to build by helping with repairs and reconstructions. By the time they're adults, they've built dozens of shelters in different places, learning which designs work where, which materials are best for what purposes, how to evaluate whether a shelter can be repaired or should be abandoned. This knowledge is as important as hunting or plant gathering. Shelter is survival, and knowing how to create it quickly at any location is essential. When the decision comes to abandon a camp, the shelters are left standing. Sometimes the group strips off hides that are still usable, carrying them to the next camp. Sometimes they take wooden poles if good material is scarce ahead. But often, they leave everything. The frames collapse over time, eventually returning to the forest floor. The hides rot away. The grass disperses. Within a few years, little evidence remains of the shelter beyond some discolored ground and maybe a few stones that were used to weight down edges. The group sometimes returns to old campsites and finds remnants of their previous shelters. A collapsed frame half buried in leaves. Scraps of hide weathered beyond use. These ruins don't bring sadness. They're just reminders of temporary homes that served their purpose. The group doesn't mourn shelters any more than they mourn campfires that burned out. Both provided what was needed when it was needed, then were left behind. But there's something deeper in this pattern of building and abandoning. The group could try to build more permanent structures, using more effort and materials. They have the knowledge, but doing so would mean committing to a location, betting that it will remain viable long term. And they know from experience that no location remains viable. Resources deplete, seasons change, problems accumulate. Permanence is a trap. Flexibility is survival. So they build temporary shelters knowing they're temporary. The structure that took 3 days to build and 3 weeks to make comfortable will be abandoned after 3 months. This isn't waste. It's adaptation. The group builds what each place requires for the time they'll be there, then moves on when circumstances demand it, ready to build again in the next place. The impermanence of shelters reinforces the impermanence of camps. If the group had invested months building a massive permanent structure, leaving would feel like abandoning enormous effort. The cost would make them reluctant to move even when movement made sense. But temporary shelters that wear out on their own timeline make movement easier. When the shelter is failing and the camp's resources are depleted, leaving isn't abandoning something valuable. It's simply moving on from something that served its purpose. And so the shelters rise and fall with the rhythm of camps. Built quickly when arriving, maintained adequately during occupation, abandoned without regret when leaving. Each one a temporary solution to the permanent need for protection from weather and cold. Each one left behind as the group walks toward the next camp, the next location, the next shelter they'll build and eventually abandon. The wood bends in experienced hands, the frame takes shape, the hides stretch across. Another shelter rises. It will stand through this season, maybe into the next. But already, as they build it, everyone knows. Eventually, this too will be left behind. Eventually, they'll walk away from this place, this shelter, this temporary home that can never be more than temporary. The plants tell the story of seasons in their own language. Early spring brings shoots pushing through soil, wild onions, marsh marigold, fiddlehead ferns. These greens are tender, nutritious, abundant for perhaps 3 weeks. The group positions themselves where these plants emerge in profusion, gathering daily, eating fresh, drying some for later. The food is good, the work is easy, and the calories add up. But spring plants mature quickly. What was tender shoot becomes tough stalk. What was palatable becomes bitter. By late spring, the same plants that fed the group aren't worth gathering. They're still there, still growing, but they've passed the window of usability. The group could stay and force down the tougher vegetation, but why? Other plants at higher elevations are just entering their prime window. The group moves upslope. Not far, maybe a day's walk, but enough to reach areas where spring arrived later. Here, the same species they harvested 3 weeks ago in the lowlands are just emerging, fresh, tender, perfect for gathering. The group harvests intensively again, knowing this window will also close quickly. They're not following random movement. They're following the wave of plant growth as it advances up the elevation gradient. Different plants have different schedules. Roots are best dug in early spring before energy goes into leaf growth. Nuts fall in autumn. Berries ripen in sequence through summer, low bush blueberries first, then service berries, then high bush cranberries. The group knows these schedules intimately. They position themselves where each resource peaks, moving to catch the abundance windows as they open and close across the landscape. Some plants require specific elevations. Certain mushrooms only grow in deep forest. Particular berries need sunny slopes. Specific roots thrive in wetlands. The group's movement follows these distributions, going to forests when forest resources peak, to open slopes when those resources are ready, to wetlands when their plants become available. The landscape isn't uniform, and the group's path traces the locations of diverse plant foods. The timing is learned, not written. Elders know that pine nuts are ready when the cones turn brown and resin stops flowing freely. They know bearberries sweeten after the first frost. They know certain roots are easiest to dig when soil is damp from autumn rains, but before winter freeze. This knowledge accumulates across lifetimes, refined through observation, passed down through teaching and practice. Young people learn by gathering alongside experienced harvesters. They're shown which plants to take, which to leave, how to recognize the perfect ripeness, how to dig roots without destroying the plant's ability to regrow. They learn that some locations have better specimens than others. The south-facing slopes' berries ripen a week before the north-facing slopes. The sheltered valley's nuts are larger than the exposed ridges. Knowledge becomes detailed, location-specific, seasonal. Missing a plant harvest window can mean missing significant calories. A good berry patch might provide several days' worth of food if harvested at peak ripeness. Come a week too early and the berries are sour and small. Come a week too late and they've dried up or been eaten by birds. The group must time their presence at each location to match the plant's brief window of peak availability. This creates a detailed calendar of movement. First camp at the lowland marsh for early greens. Second camp upslope for roots. Third camp at mid-elevation for spring shoots. By early summer, move to the meadows for the first berries. Late summer, higher to the upland berry patches. Autumn, back down to oak groves for acorns. Each move timed to arrive just as that location's primary plant resource becomes harvestable. The plants also indicate when to move on. When the greens at a camp have all been harvested from reasonable walking distance, when the berry bushes are picked clean, when the root digging yields diminish. These signs tell the group their gathering has depleted the local abundance. Time to move to where plants haven't been harvested yet, where abundance is still building. Plant gathering involves more than just food. Bark from certain trees is used for containers and cordage. Reeds and grasses for basket weaving and insulation. Wood for tools and fire. Medicinal plants for treating injuries and illness. Each of these resources has its own seasonal availability and location requirements. The group's movement considers all of them, positioning camps where multiple resources can be accessed. Some plant resources can't be moved. A stand of hickory trees dropping nuts is location fixed. The group must go to the trees, not the other way around. If the hickory grove is 15 miles from where they're currently camped, they either move camp closer or make long daily journeys to gather. Usually moving makes more sense. Establish camp near the resource, harvest intensively while it's available, move on when it's exhausted or when other resources elsewhere become more important. The group also practices what might be called proto-management. They don't dig every root, ensuring some remain to propagate. They don't strip berry bushes completely, leaving some fruit for birds and for regrowth, not from any ecological ethic necessarily, but from practical knowledge. Areas harvested too hard don't recover well. Better to take most, but not all, ensuring the plants will be there next year. This careful harvesting extends the usability of territories. If the group stripped locations completely, they'd ruin them for future use. By harvesting sustainably, they maintain a rotation of productive sites. This year's heavily gathered area becomes next year's lightly gathered area, and the year after that, it's back to full production. But this only works with movement. Stay in one place, and even careful harvesting eventually exhausts everything within reasonable walking distance. Different seasons present different challenges. Spring and summer offer diverse plant foods, but they're scattered and require constant movement to follow. Autumn offers concentrated resources like nuts that can be gathered in large quantities from specific locations. The group might stay longer at an autumn nut camp because the resource is so abundant and valuable for winter stores. But even the best nut grove eventually runs out, or the group's capacity to carry and store is reached and movement resumes. Winter is hardest for plant foods. Most are gone, dormant, or inaccessible under snow. The group relies on stored plant foods from autumn gathering and on roots that can be dug if soil isn't frozen. This limits winter camps to areas where some plant resources remain accessible and where stored food can sustain them through the months of scarcity. The return of spring plant foods is celebrated in ways that blend practical relief with deeper meaning. Those first tender greens after a winter of dried stores and root vegetables aren't just food, they're proof that the cycle continues. The group knows to move to where these plants emerge first, knows the relief of fresh food after months without it, knows that following the plant's seasonal cycles is as important as following the animals. Plant knowledge and animal knowledge intertwine. The berries that ripen in late summer also attract bears, fattening for winter. Berry camps are also bear hunting opportunities. The meadows where roots grow also support rabbits and other small game. Acorn groves attract deer and squirrels. The group positions camps considering both plant and animal resources, maximizing access to diverse food sources. But plants drive movement in ways animals don't. Animals can be pursued, tracked, followed. Plants are stationary. They grow where they grow, ripen when they ripen, and can't be relocated. The group must go to them. This creates an inflexible schedule. The plants don't wait. Miss the window and that resource is gone for a year. The berries don't stay ripe because you're delayed. The roots don't remain easy to dig just because you're not ready to move. So the group moves, following the plant calendar as much as any other factor, to the places where growth is just reaching perfect ripeness, to the elevations where seasonal timing matches the group's arrival, to the locations where specific species grow in gatherable abundance. The movement is commanded not by choice, but by plants' biological schedules, by the brief windows when food is available and must be taken. And the plants, in their silence, are as demanding as any other force. They say, "We are ready now, not later. We grow here, not there. We ripen for these few weeks, then we're gone. Come when we call or go without." The group listens, learns, remembers, and moves, always moves, following the green wave of growth as it pulses across the landscape through the turning year. The tracks in the mud are fresh, made within the hour. Wolf prints, many of them, circling the area where the group butchered yesterday's kill. The wolves found the remains, scavenged what was left, and clearly marked the area as part of their territory. The pack is close, probably watching from the tree line. At night, the howling starts. Not far away, maybe a quarter mile. The wolves are establishing presence, communicating with each other, making clear that they're here. The group keeps the fire burning bright, maintaining watches through the darkness. Wolves rarely attack humans directly, but a child alone, a person injured and separated, an unwatched food supply. These are vulnerabilities the wolves will exploit if given opportunity. By the third night of close howling, The group discusses moving, not in panic, but with practical assessment. The wolves have learned this camp's location, learned its routines, grown comfortable operating nearby. They're getting bolder, appearing at the edge of firelight, testing boundaries. The camp has become known to predators, and staying means increasing risk. The lions are worse. Cave lions are larger than wolves, less predictable, more dangerous to humans. A pride that discovers a human camp will sometimes stake out the area, waiting for vulnerable moments. The group has seen their tracks near the water source, caught their scent on the wind. Big cats mostly hunt at night, and recently the darkness has felt more threatening. 2 nights ago, something large moved in the blackness beyond the fire's reach. People heard it, sensed it, though nothing was seen clearly. Children woke frightened. Adults tightened the watch rotation. Morning revealed lion tracks right at the camp's edge, proof that a big cat had approached close enough to observe the sleeping group. This kind of attention is how attacks begin. The group knows from experience and from stories. Predators that learn camp patterns become dangerous. The wolf pack that knows when people leave camp and when they return. The lion that watches the daily water gathering and recognizes vulnerability. The hyenas that understand the camp's waste disposal and associate human presence with scavenging opportunity. Familiarity breeds confidence in predators, and confident predators become threats. Moving disrupts this learning. A new camp in a new location means predators don't know the routine, don't have the place figured out, haven't developed hunting strategies specific to that location. The group becomes unpredictable again. The wolves following them might eventually find the new camp, but that takes time, and perhaps by then the group will move again. The relationship with predators is complex. They're competitors for game, killing the same animals the group hunts. They're threats, especially to children and the vulnerable, but they're also reality, part of the landscape, impossible to eliminate. The group doesn't try to fight them off permanently. They manage risk by staying alert and, when necessary, by moving. Some areas have higher predator densities than others. Valleys with good game attract wolves and lions in numbers. Open grasslands might have fewer large predators, but more small ones like foxes. The group learns which locations are relatively safer and which require extra vigilance. This knowledge influences camp placement, sometimes choosing a less optimal location for resources if it means fewer predator encounters. But even safe areas don't stay safe indefinitely. Predators' territories shift. A lion pride that wasn't in an area last year might be there this year. Wolves displaced from elsewhere might move into previously cleared territory. The group must stay flexible, reading signs, responding to new threats, moving when predator pressure becomes too intense. The most dangerous situations involve predators learning to specifically target humans. Most predators avoid people instinctively, seeing them as dangerous or unfamiliar. But occasionally, an individual predator learns that humans can be prey. Perhaps it's an old animal unable to catch normal prey, or one injured and desperate. When this happens, the threat becomes immediate and the entire group is at risk. If such a predator is identified, through tracks showing it followed the group deliberately, or through an actual attack, the response is usually to move immediately, putting distance between the group and the threat. Sometimes hunters will try to kill the dangerous animal first, but this is risky and doesn't always succeed. Movement is the reliable solution. Leave the area, break the predator's pattern, relocate where the dangerous individual doesn't know to look. Even without specific dangerous individuals, the general accumulation of predator awareness drives movement. After weeks in one place, every predator in the region knows humans are there. Wolves have scent marked the surrounding territory with human camp at its center. Lions have incorporated the area into their mental maps. Hyenas check the camp's waste pile regularly. The group lives inside a web of predator attention that tightens over time. Moving breaks this web. The new camp isn't yet on predators' mental maps. The surrounding territory isn't yet scent-marked by animals that know humans are present. For a while, the group operates under the cover of unfamiliarity. They're just strange scents in an area predators aren't specifically monitoring. This breathing room is valuable, even if temporary. The children understand predator pressure instinctively. They learn young not to wander from camp alone, to stay within sight of adults, to come running when an alarm is raised. They learn the sounds of different predators, the times of day they're most active, the signs that something dangerous is near. This constant low-level vigilance is exhausting but necessary. Adults organize watches, maintaining fire through the night, keeping weapons ready. But this vigilance has costs. Sleep is interrupted. Energy is spent on guard duty rather than rest. Over time, the strain accumulates. When combined with other pressures, depleted resources, accumulating waste, worn shelters, the predator pressure becomes another strong reason to move. The group doesn't hate predators or see them as enemies exactly. They're part of life, like weather or hunger. But they're a pressure that must be managed, and movement is one of the primary management tools. Stay too long and predators become too comfortable. Move regularly, and the group stays ahead of predator learning, maintaining the edge that keeps everyone safer. Occasionally, the group witnesses predators' own movements. A wolf pack migrating through, following deer herds. Lions shifting territories after a territorial dispute. These movements aren't random. Predators follow prey and opportunity just like humans do. Sometimes the group's movements and predator movements align, creating sustained pressure. Other times they diverge, offering relief. The old ones tell stories of groups that stayed too long in predator-rich areas, that stopped moving despite increasing danger. The stories don't end well. Attacks, losses, sometimes the destruction of entire small groups. These stories serve as warnings, reminders that movement isn't just about food and resources. It's about not becoming too familiar to the things that might eat you. And so, predator pressure joins the list of forces commanding movement. Not always the strongest force, not always the most immediate, but always present. The wolves howling too close, the lion tracks too near camp, the general sense of being watched and mapped by creatures that hunt in darkness. These pressures build until the group decides time to disappear, time to become unknown again, time to move. They pack in the morning, scatter the fire, and walk away from the camp that has become too known. Behind them, the wolves will find an abandoned site. The lions will discover their watched prey has vanished. The pressure releases, reset, beginning to build again at the next camp. But for now, walking away, the group feels lighter. The predators will have to find them again. And by the time they do, perhaps it will be time to move once more. The ice moves slowly, but it moves. The glacier that wasn't in the valley 3 generations ago now fills it completely. A wall of ice as high as the trees, groaning and creaking as it advances. The areas that were summer camps, that grandparents remember as flower-filled meadows, are now buried under ice that won't melt for thousands of years. The group knows about the ice from stories and from direct observation. Each decade, it's noticeably farther down the valley. Camps that were possible 20 years ago are now impossible, crushed under the glacier's weight or pushed aside by its inexorable movement. The ice is claiming land, forcing everything living to move or die. This isn't the crisis of a single season. It's the pressure of generations. The group's great-grandparents camped farther north, in places that are now under ice. Their grandparents adjusted, finding new camping areas farther south. Their parents adjusted again. And now this generation must adjust once more, moving into territories that are already occupied, competing with groups who were there first, pushing the boundaries of known land. The ice doesn't just block territory, it changes everything. The weather patterns shift as the glacier grows. Winds blow colder, summers shorten, winters come earlier and last longer. The plants and animals that survive are the cold-adapted ones, and even they're stressed. The abundance that existed generations ago is memory now, replaced by a harsher reality. Some groups migrate vast distances to escape the worst of the ice. They move hundreds of miles south, following the shrinking habitable zones. These migrations take years, not weeks. Generations live and die during the journey. The stories of the homeland become myths, places none of the living have seen, remembered only in songs and tales told by elders who heard them from their elders. Other groups adapt in place, learning to survive closer to the ice margins. They hunt the animals that can tolerate cold: reindeer, mammoth, musk ox. They develop better clothing, better shelters, better strategies for enduring longer winters. But they also move more frequently because the productive areas near the ice are small and quickly exhausted. The group sometimes encounters refugees from farther north, small bands pushed out by advancing ice, looking for new territories, desperate and dangerous because they have nowhere else to go. These meetings can turn violent. When land becomes scarce and ice makes old territories uninhabitable, humans compete with humans in ways that aren't necessary during times of abundance. But usually, the competition resolves through movement rather than warfare. One group moves farther east, another heads south. Territories adjust, boundaries shift, and everyone finds space to survive, even if that space is smaller than before. Movement creates flexibility that prevents conflict from becoming catastrophic. The volcanic winter comes without warning. One autumn, the sky darkens and doesn't clear. Ash falls like snow, covering everything in gray. The sun appears as a dim red disk, barely warming the land. Temperatures drop catastrophically. Summer never arrives the next year. Plants struggle or fail. Animals starve or migrate away. The group faces conditions they've never experienced. They move desperately, searching for areas less affected. But the volcanic ash has spread across vast regions. Everywhere they go, the gray blanket covers the ground. The plants that do grow taste wrong, coated in ash. The water sources cloud with sediment. The hunting fails because the animals are gone or dying. Many people die that year and the following years. Starvation, cold, disease from weakened bodies. The group shrinks from 30 people to 18. Other groups disappear entirely. The land that supported diverse human populations now barely supports any. Those who survive do so by moving constantly, exploiting tiny pockets of relative abundance, never staying anywhere long because nowhere gives enough to sustain even brief occupation. Eventually, the ash settles. Years later, the weather begins to normalize. Plants recover, animals return, the human population slowly rebuilds. But the survivors carry the memory. They know that the land can turn deadly without warning, that ice can advance or volcanoes can explode. That safety is always temporary. Movement isn't just about following food, it's about not being caught in one place when catastrophe strikes. The stories passed down emphasize this. The group that tried to wait out the volcanic winter in one camp, hoping it would pass, they died. The group that kept moving, kept searching, kept trying new areas, some of them survived. Movement saved those who moved. Staying killed those who stayed. These climate catastrophes operate on timescales longer than individual lifetimes, but shorter than the species' existence. No one alive remembers the world before the ice began advancing, but everyone lives with its effects. The territories are smaller, the weather is harsher, the margin for error is narrower. Movement has always been necessary, But now it's even more critical because the land gives less and takes more. The group knows they live in hard times. The elders say it was easier before, though whether before means their youth or some mythical past is unclear. What's certain is now the ice is there, the weather is cold, the growing seasons are short, and survival requires constant adaptation. Movement is adaptation. Every time the group relocates, they're adjusting to conditions that keep changing. Some years are better, some worse. A warmer decade melts back the ice slightly, opens new areas for summer camps, increases plant and animal abundance. The group breathes easier, moves less frantically. Then a colder decade returns, ice advances again, and the desperate movement resumes. They ride these oscillations, never able to settle because the land itself won't stay still. The group sometimes finds evidence of earlier inhabitants in territories they move through, stone tools of unfamiliar design, old hearth rings, bones from hunts long past. These remnants show that people lived here before, perhaps when the climate was different, perhaps before ice or volcanic ash or some other catastrophe drove them out or killed them. The evidence is humbling. We're not the first to struggle here, and we may not be the last. But these thoughts don't lead to despair. They lead to determination. The ancestors survived by moving, by adapting, by refusing to give up when conditions changed. The current group does the same. When ice advances, move south. When volcanoes darken the sky, move and keep moving until you find areas less affected. When climate shifts, shift with it. The land has never been stable. The climate has never been constant. Ice advances and retreats over thousands of years. Volcanic eruptions happen across centuries. Droughts, floods, heat waves, cold snaps, all of these test human populations repeatedly. The groups that survive are the ones that refuse to be tied to any single place, that treat the entire landscape as home, that move as readily as the wind. And so climate change, operating on scales from annual to millennial, becomes another force commanding movement. Not always visible in the short term, not always pressing in every moment, but always present. The ice that claims another valley this decade. The volcano that might explode next year or next century. The warming trend or cooling trend that shifts where survival is possible. The group moves not just because this camp is exhausted, but because the land itself is in motion. Ice flowing, climate shifting, catastrophe possible. They move to survive the next season, but also to survive the next century. Movement is their response to a world that refuses to stay still, that changes on every time scale, that permits survival only to those who refuse to be frozen in place. The band camps with 30 people this spring. It's crowded but manageable. Food is shared, work is distributed, the children have playmates, the adults have help with tasks. But by midsummer, tensions show. Whose turn to gather firewood? Who gets the best cuts of meat? Which family's children disturb the others with their noise? Small disputes that would fade in a smaller group grow into feuds. Two families stop speaking after an argument over food distribution. A man feels disrespected during a hunt and refuses to cooperate with certain others. The group's cohesion frays under the pressure of too many people in too small a space for too long. The resources begin to strain as well. 30 people deplete firewood, game, plants, and water faster than 20 would. The camp that might have sustained a smaller group for 2 months barely makes it through 6 weeks before everything nearby is used up. The combination of social tension and resource pressure creates a crisis. The resolution is predictable. The group splits. Two families decide to leave, taking their share of supplies and heading east to find their own camping grounds. The remaining people reorganize, redistributing work and space. The tension eases immediately. There's more food per person, Less conflict. The camp feels more comfortable despite having fewer hands for labor. This splitting isn't failure. It's pressure relief. Groups that stay too large for too long either face constant conflict or exhaust resources catastrophically. By splitting before either crisis becomes severe, both resulting bands have better chances of survival. The families that left will do fine on their own. The families that stayed will manage better with fewer people. But splitting requires movement. The leaving families can't stay in the same area. The resources won't support two camps so close together. They must move to new territory, perhaps a day's walk away, perhaps farther. This movement redistributes population across the landscape, preventing any one area from being overused. The group knows they might reunite later, perhaps next spring at a traditional gathering place, or perhaps not, if both groups find their separate paths more successful. Flexibility in group composition requires constant movement. People join, people leave, bands merge and split, all enabled by the ability to move to new territories. Sometimes the movement is more dramatic. A conflict becomes too intense to resolve by simple splitting. Two men fight over leadership or mating rights or some perceived disrespect. The fight threatens to divide the entire group. Rather than let conflict destroy everyone, one of the men leaves, taking his immediate family and whoever chooses to follow him. This departure is sometimes angry, sometimes sad, but always necessary. The person leaving and the people staying both know sharing space requires getting along, and if you can't get along, you must separate. Movement makes separation possible. Without the ability to move and establish a new camp elsewhere, the conflict would have to be resolved through continued violence. Movement allows resolution through distance. The group also moves to connect with others. Marriage between groups prevents inbreeding and creates alliances, but finding potential mates requires meeting other groups, which requires movement. The band travels to traditional gathering places where multiple groups camp together for a few weeks during summer. Young people meet, courtships develop, marriages form. These gatherings serve other purposes too. Trade happens. High-quality stone from one region exchanged for hides from another. Knowledge spreads. Someone shares a new tool technique or reports game movements in their territory. Stories are told, strengthening cultural bonds across groups who might not see each other for another year. But the gatherings can't last long. Too many people in one place deplete resources rapidly. The game is hunted hard, the plants are gathered out, the firewood is exhausted. After a few weeks, the groups must split apart again, moving to their separate territories, carrying with them the new marriages, new tools, new knowledge gained from the brief, intense period of contact. The movement between isolation and gathering creates a rhythm. Most of the year, bands are separate, moving through their own territories, rarely encountering others. But at planned times, they converge, interact intensely, then disperse again. This pattern maintains social connections while preventing the resource exhaustion that would come from permanent large settlements. Young people newly married often move with their spouse's group, creating genetic flow between bands. A woman from one group joins another through marriage, bringing her knowledge, skills, and genetic heritage. Her children will know stories from both groups, carry techniques from both traditions. Over generations, this movement of individuals between groups keeps populations connected despite geographic separation. The elderly sometimes choose to stay behind when a group moves. Too tired to keep up, too worn to face another journey, they ask the group to leave them with fire and supplies. It's a difficult decision, but sometimes necessary. The alternative is the entire group slowing down, risking everyone for the sake of one person who knows their time is limited. This isn't cruelty. The elderly person often suggests it themselves, recognizing reality. They've moved their whole lives, following the group through countless camps. When they can't move anymore, staying behind is their last choice, made to protect those they love. The group mourns, but moves on. Later, if they return to that area, they might find remains and offer respects. But the living must keep moving. Children grow up understanding that group composition is fluid. People you camp with today might split off tomorrow. Relatives might leave to join another band through marriage. New people might join from elsewhere. The group is never exactly the same from year to year. This fluidity is normal, expected, enabled by movement. Stay in one place and you're locked with whoever is there. Keep moving, and you can separate from those who don't fit and connect with those who do. The leadership itself is flexible because of movement. A poor leader who insists on bad decisions finds people leaving. They don't argue endlessly. They simply walk away to form or join other bands. This creates natural accountability. Leaders who want to maintain group size must lead well, listen to concerns, make decisions that work. Otherwise, people vote with their feet. This same principle applies to anyone causing problems. A person who consistently creates conflict, who steals or threatens or refuses to contribute, eventually the group doesn't drive them out so much as everyone else leaves. The problem person finds themselves alone, which is often fatal. But the mechanism isn't violence, it's abandonment through movement. The group occasionally encounters bands that are struggling, too small to hunt effectively, or hit by disease, or lost members to accident. Sometimes they absorb these people, growing the band temporarily. Sometimes they travel together for a while, offering support until the struggling group recovers. Movement allows these fluid alliances, helping both groups survive periods of weakness. But absorbing outsiders also requires finding new territories with sufficient resources. A band that grows from 20 to 30 people through merger needs to move more frequently or find richer camping grounds. The social benefit of larger group size comes with resource costs. The balance is maintained through movement, finding places that can support more people, or splitting again when resources can't sustain the enlarged band. Trade networks exist across vast distances, maintained by movement. A shell from the coast ends up 200 miles inland, not because one person walked that far, but because it passed through multiple groups, each moving and trading across their territory. The shell moves from group to group through chance encounters, planned meetings, and marriage connections. Movement creates the network. Without it, trade would be limited to immediate neighbors. The group's territory overlaps with other groups' territories, but timing prevents constant conflict. One band uses the northern valleys in summer, while another uses them in winter. They share space by using it at different times, which requires both bands to move seasonally. If either stayed permanently, conflict would be inevitable. Movement allows sharing without fighting. Sometimes the group encounters signs that another band is near. Fresh tracks, smoke from their fires, a recently abandoned camp. Usually, both groups avoid each other, adjusting their movements to maintain distance, not from hostility necessarily, but from practical recognition that two groups in the same area deplete resources faster. By moving to avoid overlap, both survive better. But occasionally, meetings are deliberate. Two groups coordinate to hunt together, taking down a mammoth that requires many hunters. They share the meat, camp together briefly, then separate again. The cooperation works because both groups can move afterward to their own territories. Without movement, the hunters would have to compete permanently for the same resources. Children hear stories of their relatives in other bands, cousins, aunts, uncles, who moved away through marriage or splitting. These stories maintain family bonds across distance. When groups meet again, relatives reconnect. A child might spend time with an aunt they haven't seen in years, hearing stories of different places, learning different techniques. Then they separate again, not knowing when they'll meet next. This network of relationships across moving groups creates resilience. A band facing disaster, fire destroying their supplies, disease killing several members, hunting accident, can seek help from related groups. They move to where those groups are likely to be, hoping for shelter and support. Sometimes they find it, sometimes they don't. But the possibility exists because groups maintain knowledge of each other's movements even across distances and years. The group's mental map includes not just geography and resources, but other people. They know which other bands use which territories, roughly when they'll be there. This knowledge helps avoid conflicts and enables connections. It's maintained through occasional meetings, through stories exchanged, through the memories of those who've moved between groups and know multiple bands' patterns. As the group walks toward the next camp, they are always aware that they're not alone on the land. Other groups are moving too, following their own patterns, facing their own challenges. Sometimes paths cross, sometimes they don't. But the movement itself creates a flexible human geography where distance and connection, conflict and cooperation, splitting and merging all happen through the simple mechanism of walking away or walking toward. The social landscape is as fluid as the physical one. Groups form, split, reform in new combinations. People move between bands through marriage, adoption, refuge. Alliances form and dissolve. All of it enabled by movement, the ability to separate when necessary, connect when beneficial, never being locked permanently into any single social configuration. And so the group walks, not just following food and water and seasons, but also navigating human relationships, moving away from conflict, moving toward connection, splitting when too large, gathering when beneficial, using movement to maintain social flexibility that's as essential to survival as accessing resources. Because humans are social creatures, and managing human relationships in a world without police or courts or written contracts requires the ability to vote with your feet, to leave what doesn't work and go toward what might. The horizon pulls. Not this valley. Maybe the next one has better hunting. Not this camp. Maybe farther upstream the water runs cleaner. Not this location. Somewhere else might be easier, safer, more abundant. The grass always seems greener just beyond where the group stands now, and sometimes it actually is. This pull isn't just fantasy. The group accumulates knowledge of distant places through various sources. A hunter ranging far from camp reports a valley thick with game. Someone who joined from another band describes a forest where nuts fall in abundance. Stories from chance meetings with other groups tell of rivers rich with fish, meadows perfect for camping, areas where the ice never formed. These reports create a mental catalog of possibilities. The group knows that staying here is certain resources running low, certain problems accumulating, certain reasons to leave. But moving there offers possibility, possible abundance, possible improvement, possible relief from current difficulties. When certainty is declining and possibility is attractive, movement makes sense. Sometimes the pull is specific. The group has been to the described valley before, years ago, and remembers it was good. They know it exists, know how to reach it, can evaluate whether going there makes sense now. Other times the pull is vaguer, just a sense that somewhere else might be better, a restless feeling that staying isn't optimal even if leaving isn't guaranteed improvement. The group debates these pulls. Elders who remember past movements share what happened when they chased distant promises. Sometimes it worked gloriously. The new location was everything hoped for. Sometimes it failed miserably. The journey was hard, the destination disappointing, and they had to move again quickly. The young people listen but feel the pull strongly, less weighted by past failures, more excited by possible success. Often, the decision to move toward distant, better places comes when current location is becoming untenable anyway, when the camp is depleting, when problems are accumulating, when staying means watching conditions worsen. That's when the pull of elsewhere becomes irresistible. The group isn't abandoning success to gamble. They're leaving decline to seek improvement. The journey toward the better place becomes its own challenge. If it's far, the group might take weeks to reach it, camping at intermediate locations, living off what they find along the way. If the journey crosses unfamiliar territory, risks multiply. Unknown water sources, unfamiliar game, potential encounters with hostile groups who consider it their territory. Sometimes the group arrives at the better place and finds it is better. The hunting is excellent, the water clean, the camping comfortable. They stay as long as resources allow, maybe months, maybe an entire season. The risk of moving paid off. The pull was accurate. The decision was correct, at least temporarily. Other times they arrive to find the better place isn't so good anymore. The game has moved. Other groups are already there. The resource that was abundant years ago has declined. The reality doesn't match the promise. The group must adapt quickly, stay anyway and make it work, or move again immediately to find actually productive ground. These disappointments don't stop the pull from operating. Next time conditions decline, the group will still feel the attraction of elsewhere, still listen to reports of better places, still consider moving toward distant possibilities, because sometimes it works, and when it works, it can mean the difference between struggling and thriving. The pull also operates on longer timescales. The group might gradually shift their entire territorial range over decades, following the slow movement of resources, climate, or other human populations. What was core territory for grandparents becomes occasional stopping ground for grandchildren as the center of the group's range drifts north or south or whichever direction offers better conditions. This slow drift isn't planned as long-term strategy. It emerges from individual decisions to move toward better places, repeated across generations. Each move might be just a few miles farther in one direction, but accumulated across decades, the total displacement can be substantial. The group doesn't realize they're migrating. They're just following the eternal pull toward something better. Occasionally, the pull is strong enough to prompt major relocations. A group facing deteriorating conditions in their entire territory might decide to move to a different region entirely, leaving behind familiar ground to seek opportunity in lands they've only heard about. These migrations are risky, essentially betting the group's survival on reports and hopes. Some of these major moves succeed spectacularly. The group finds abundant territory, less competition, better conditions. They establish new patterns in new land, thriving in ways that weren't possible in the old territory. Their descendants tell stories of the great move, how the ancestors had courage to leave the failing land and seek prosperity elsewhere. Other major moves fail tragically. The new territory is already occupied by groups who resist intruders. The resources aren't as good as reported. The journey kills some members through accident, exposure, or starvation. The survivors either struggle on in the new place or attempt the dangerous journey back, sometimes finding their old territory now occupied by others. But whether moves succeed or fail, the pull continues to operate. The sense that somewhere else might offer something better than here. The hope that the next valley, the next ridge, the next territory will be the place where the group can stop struggling and start thriving. It's this hope, more than desperation, that keeps people walking toward horizons they haven't yet reached. The pull also manifests as curiosity. What's beyond that mountain? Where does this river lead? What lives in that forest we haven't explored? Young hunters especially feel this pull, wanting to range far, see new things, report back on discoveries. This curiosity serves survival, finding new resources, new territories, new possibilities, but it's also something deeper, something that seems inherent to being human. Elders manage this curiosity, balancing it against safety. Yes, explore that valley, but take others with you. Yes, range far, but come back before dark. Yes, seek new places, but remember the path home. The group survives by moving, but also by not moving so recklessly that people get lost or killed in unknown territory. The pull toward better places interacts with all the other pressures. When food is running low and someone reports a valley rich with game, the pull aligns with necessity. When camp is comfortable but someone describes an even better location, the pull conflicts with contentment. The group weighs these factors constantly, deciding when to follow the pull and when to resist it. What makes the pull powerful is that it's often correct. Not always, but often enough. Other places are sometimes better. Moving toward reported abundance sometimes leads to actual abundance. The group that stays when they should go suffers. The group that goes when they should go thrives. Over generations, following the pull becomes ingrained, not blind optimism, but practical recognition that standing still while conditions decline is worse than moving toward possibility. And so the group moves, pulled by reports of better places, pulled by memories of good camps in distant locations, pulled by the eternal hope that the next place will be easier than this one. The pull isn't guaranteed success, but it's better than certain decline. It keeps the group searching, moving, trying, adapting. It keeps them from becoming too attached to any single place, too committed to ground that's giving out, too loyal to camps that are failing. The horizon always has another valley beyond it, another river around the next bend, another forest past the ridge, and maybe, just maybe, that next place is the one where the hunting is easy, the water is clean, the camping is perfect, and the group can finally rest. Probably not. Probably it's just another place with its own advantages and problems. But the maybe is enough to keep everyone walking, keep everyone moving, keep everyone following the pull that's driven human movement since the first person looked at a distant hill and wondered what lay beyond. The rhythm settles into the bones over time. Wake with dawn, tend fire, gather food, work on tools and hides, eat, sleep, repeat. But always with the knowledge, this is temporary. The camp that feels like home today won't be home in a few weeks. Nothing stays. Everything flows. Movement isn't a disruption to life. Movement is life. Children grow up never knowing permanence. By the time they're old enough to remember, they've lived in a dozen camps. The places blur together in memory, defined less by location than by what happened there. The camp where someone was born, the camp where the big storm hit, the camp where the hunters took the mammoth. Geography is autobiography, each place marking a chapter in personal and group history. This creates a different relationship to place than settled peoples develop. The group doesn't own land, they use it temporarily. They don't invest in permanent improvement. They take what exists and move on. They don't defend territory aggressively. Sharing through temporal separation makes more sense than fighting. The land is provider, not possession. Yet the land isn't meaningless. The group knows their territory intimately. Every water source, every good camping spot, every location where specific resources appear seasonally. They love the land not as property, but as relationship. These mountains have sheltered us. These valleys have fed us. These rivers have given water. The knowledge is deep, the connection real, even without ownership. The stories told around fires are often stories of movement. The time we crossed the high pass in early snow. The journey to reach the salmon run before it ended. The season we followed the reindeer farther north than anyone remembered going. Movement provides the narrative structure of life. You know you're alive. because you've moved from where you were to where you are, and you'll move again to where you'll be. Elders near death sometimes request to be left at places that held meaning, where they were born, where they had some significant experience, where the land particularly pleased them. They want their body to return to ground that mattered, even though they know the group will move on and might never return. It's a way of saying, I was always moving, but this spot at least I claim as mine in death. The young people feel the rhythm differently. For them, movement is adventure, novelty, the excitement of new places. They haven't yet experienced the exhaustion of endless packing and walking. They see the next camp as possibility. The older people know better. The next camp will be like this camp, just different locations for the same activities. But they don't discourage youth's excitement. That energy helps everyone keep moving. Midlife adults carry the weight of movement most heavily. They're strong enough to do the hardest work, carrying the most, walking the fastest, building the best shelters. They have children to manage, slowing them down. They have aging parents to consider, adding complexity to movement decisions. They feel most acutely the trade-offs between staying and going, the exhaustion of never settling, the necessity of constant motion. The group develops practices that make movement easier. They don't accumulate possessions beyond what can be carried. They perfect the art of quick shelter construction. They memorize routes and resources, so each move requires less scouting. They develop mental toughness for the repetitive work of packing, walking, unpacking, establishing camp, doing it all again in a few weeks. But even with practices and experience, movement is hard. Feet hurt, backs ache, children cry, elderly struggle, weather doesn't cooperate. The destination is farther than remembered. The new camp isn't as good as hoped. Every move involves pain, effort, risk. Yet they keep moving because staying involves different pain: hunger, cold, danger, decline. Over a lifetime, the average person might live in 200 different camps, some very briefly, some for months, all temporary. That's 200 times packing, 200 journeys, 200 arrivals, 200 times building shelter, 200 times learning the immediate surroundings, 200 times leaving. The sheer amount of movement across a single life is staggering, yet people don't experience it as staggering. It's just how life works. You move because seasons change. You move because resources deplete. You move because the group splits or merges. You move because it's time to move, the same way you breathe because it's time to breathe. Movement is automatic, essential, continuous. The group sometimes passes old camps they used years ago. The shelters have collapsed. The fire pits are filled with leaves. The paths have vanished under new growth. It's like visiting graves. Here we lived, now we don't. Life goes on. But there's no time for nostalgia. The current journey has a destination, and darkness is coming. They keep walking. What would it be like to stay? The group occasionally wonders. To build once and never tear down. To know every tree intimately across years, not weeks. To watch the same view through all seasons, through years, through generations. It must be nice, they think. Or maybe it would be boring. Or maybe impossible. Wouldn't you just use up everything and starve? The question is academic. Staying isn't an option, so wondering about it leads nowhere. Some people are better at movement than others. Some love the constant change, feel enlivened by new locations, never tire of walking. Others find it wearing, dream of staying, feel the toll of endless motion. But both types keep moving because the group moves as a unit. Individual preference bows to collective necessity. You can dislike movement while doing it anyway, because refusing to move is refusing to survive. The rhythm becomes identity. We are the people who walk. We are the group that follows seasons. We are those who live everywhere and nowhere, who know the land by traveling it, who survive by never stopping. The movement that seemed like hardship to young people becomes badge of pride to adults and wisdom to elders. This is who we are, people in motion. And really, it's not so bad. Yes, it's work. Yes, it's tiring. But it's also life, full, dynamic, engaged with the world in immediate ways. The settled farmers of future millennia will have their own struggles, their own forms of toil. The group doesn't know this, but their lives aren't harder necessarily, just different. They work by moving. Others will work by staying. Both are human ways of surviving. As the group walks toward tonight's destination, they carry with them everything they are. The fire's coals wrapped carefully, the tools that took hours to make, the children not yet strong enough to walk all day, the knowledge of where they've been and where they're going, the stories of movements past and hopes for movements to come. And tomorrow, or next week, or next month, they'll pack again and walk again and arrive somewhere new but familiar. They'll build another temporary home. They'll live until resources or seasons or circumstances say it's time to move. And they'll move again and again and again until eventually they can't move anymore, until age or injury or death stops the walking. But even then, the group keeps moving. The individual stops, but the collective continues. New children are born into the rhythm. New adults take up the work. New elders carry the knowledge. The movement that defined individual lives also defines the group across generations, across centuries, across the entire span of time when humans lived by moving instead of staying. The constant movement isn't a problem to solve or a hardship to escape. It's the answer to the fundamental question of survival in this time, this place, this world. How do you live when no place gives enough to sustain permanent occupation? You move. How do you survive when everything changes seasonally? You move. How do you thrive when the best strategy is being where resources are abundant, when they're abundant? You move. The group doesn't philosophize about this. They just do it, have always done it, will keep doing it for as long as the world demands it. Movement is life. Life is movement. And so they move, today and tomorrow and the day after, following the rhythms older than memory, walking the paths that lead everywhere and nowhere, living the only way they know how, by never staying still.